All right. All right. We're live. Welcome. I don't know. Where's Neil? But I'm joking. But anyways, so we're recording a lot going on this week in the world of sport and in politics and struggle and everything that entails. Um, Got to get my lighting game stepped up here a little bit, but that'll work better. Anyway, so yeah, let's get started. A couple things to hop in on. Just from the top. I'm going to be talking about this tomorrow by any means necessary. So this race norming piece that dropped in the Washington Post earlier today has a lot of people talking. So NFL says it will end controversial race norming and concussion settlement with players, and this has to do with the practice of having a baseline level that is a lot lower for black players than it has been for white players. Therefore, when they when there's an issue of evaluating whether or not the NFL is liable for injuries and permanent type injuries related to whether it be CTE or any kind of brain disorders or whatever that develop post football. They actually use the fact that there's the cognitive decline of a black player, and the same cognitive decline of a white player would be seen differently because they have a baseline level that's much lower for black players. Therefore, they'll say, "Oh, well, that couldn't be related. That couldn't be just CTE related." And it's actually been used against to deny claims. It's really insidious. So I don't know if you have any.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think I even put this in the description, and I use this word because I feel it's what it is. This is eugenic science. I mean, this is bullshit science. The thought that you're baselining based on race and race alone goes all the way back to the push for eugenics back when turn of the century when that came out, right? And to use it to defend colonization, to use that to defend considering people savage, all this shit. I mean, it's been around. This tactic's been around, but I think that it shows that the NFL in 2021 is basically being outed for using this policy. They're ending it in 2021. I mean, It's insane that this has been going on, and they keep this down and they keep this, this is a really disgusting story. And I hope that this hurts on some level to the league in the way that it can, you know what I mean? This is bad. This is really bad, and not bad that it got out. This is bad that you ever did this, and they can't run from that. And it's going to be really interesting to see what they do to try to, make up for this. I'm sure that there's a lot of, baseline NFL fans that are not going to, you know what I mean? I think we both know who I'm talking about. The more rural white fan bases of these teams may have the thought of that this isn't that big of a deal. But I mean, this is a big deal. Yeah. This is gross.
Yeah. So race norming is an increasingly disputed practice in neuropsychology used when testing to determine if a person has a brain disease or cognitive impairment, in which race is used as a rough proxy for other factors that can affect results in learning and memory tests, such as socioeconomic background and education. So I'm reading again from the Washington Post here, which the lovely subhead, of course, is "Democracy Dies in Darkness," courtesy of Jeff Bezos. The use of race norms in the NFL's concussion settlement payouts first came to light last August when two former players accused the league in a lawsuit of discriminating against hundreds, potentially thousands of black former players. In their suit, former players Najee Davenport and Kevin Henry alleged that race norming prevented them from getting settlement payouts. In Davenport's case, he claimed that a doctor initially diagnosed him with dementia, but the NFL appealed and demanded his test scores get curved using race-normed data, which resulted in a reversal of the diagnosis. For those of you who don't remember, Najee Davenport was a star at the University of Miami and then went on to the NFL. Was a big fullback, tailback at different times earlier in his career. Really, so I mean, a guy I remember very well. Not Kevin Henry, not quite as much, but it went on to say Judge Brody dismissed the case brought by Davenport and Henry earlier this year, and then directed a mediator to examine the issue. It's unclear how many former players have been affected by the practice. Roughly 70% of former players in the former NFL players are black. The NFL and Seeger have both claimed the use of race norms was optional and ultimately the doctor's discretion. So,
yeah, doctor's discretion doing the heavy lifting there when it's doctors who came up with eugenics. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot to dig into. I mean, this also goes, the NFL's initial reaction to this. I mean, basically, the NFL and the lead attorney for about 20,000 former players on Monday both promised to end race norming. Oh, great. And then, blah, blah, blah. We just talked about that as part of the payout process in the $1 billion plus settlement of class action concussion litigation against the league. So basically, this NFL attorney, Chris Seeger, writes, "We are committed to eliminating race-based norms in the program and more broadly in the neuropsychological community." NFL said in a statement, "I am sorry for the pain this episode has caused black former players and their families. Ultimately, this settlement only works if former players believe in it. And my goal is to regain their trust and ensure the NFL is fully held to account." All right. So, yeah. Anyway, so what?
yeah. What does that look like? What does that look like? I mean, this is some of the most vile shit they've been caught doing. And what does that look like? Like, what does, you know what I mean? Like, that's a bold statement when you say, like, making up for this. Like, how do you make up for this? You can bury it because, I mean, I didn't see ESPN talk about it much. I didn't see, like, they mention it, but there's no like discussion around this.
Yeah, no, there's not. I mean, it's just sort of like, oh, we're going to learn from this and we're going to, get better and all that.
Just real quick. Yeah. It's just a real quick mention, they can't just completely not acknowledge, but it's real quick and then sweep it under the rug of just like, yeah, but we're finding out, but it's done. It's over. And no one's thinking about the fact that they were doing this in 2021, like that shouldn't have been doing this at all. You know what I mean? But like, this isn't 1921.
Yeah, right. No, I think I made a mistake here. Let's see. Chris Seeger I don't think is the NFL attorney, actually. Okay. I think he's actually the attorney that was helping, foster this settlement. So I don't mean to like throw his name out there like that. Yeah. But according to the piece, the way it was just written there, I mean, it goes, the NFL statement was like that, BS I read first. And then, he's the one trying to hold the NFL accountable there legally. So, I mean, the NFL still maintaining that no discriminations occurred, right? And like it's paid out more than $800 million to 1,000 former players, but the judge was disgusted. I mean, like the U.S. District Court Judge Anita Brody, who's overseen the settlement, has been so troubled by the revelation of race norming that she took the unusual step of appointing a mediator earlier this year to investigate. This has also been, Seeger was actually interviewed by ABC. No, I'm sorry. Actually, no, never mind. Let's put Seeger back on the hot seat. He's been in charge with facilitating this and trying to kind of like play the neutral role and make sure that basically the settlement monies are distributed in a fair and equitable way. So
they've done such a good job of all of that.
It's I mean, let's look at. I mean, also, said earlier here, Judge Brody dismissed the case brought by Davenport and Henry earlier this year, and then directed a mediator to examine the issue. It's unclear how many former players have been affected. So Judge Brody's no hero here either.
Yeah.
So but it's the whole thing. Yeah, it does speak to it. Just how the fact that was considered something that they didn't think in their minds was like that. Big of a deal. It's just sort of like done. It's sort of like, we have a benchmark testing that comes in normally we're just adjusting, we're curving things, to make sure that we're not, that we're the thing's equitable, and that like we're taking in all the data points, right? And like it gets to like also like kind of like, the whole idea of like expectations from different communities and different backgrounds, and but the thing is, it's one thing if you're like trying to look at stuff like that to try to identify gaps and identify areas where there's not equitable distribution of stuff. That's not what this was at all. This was purely being used in a way to create norms, and the norms are just very simple. That there's a lower threshold initial expectation of intelligence for black players. I mean, that's just like naked and straight to the point as you can put it. So I mean, it's gonna be interesting to see how this plays out. I want the Washington Post sounding really bringing this to the forefront today.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that. I mean, this story is not even close to being over. I mean, it's like to say that like it'll end the controversial. I mean, this is a great example of like I don't know if you listened to the Citations Needed episode where they went over like epithets, and like I thought that was interesting because to like use this headline here, it kind of makes you think of that, because controversial. Why not just say we'll end racist, race norming?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, what is? Let me put this back on, because like it's just. What is it about like this like dancing around type language that the WAPO and New York Times consistently uses, and how it's this is like a domestic issue, but like this in terms of international,
they can't punch up. They can't punch up. You know what I mean? Like they just cannot punch up. They punch up. They punch a hand that feeds them somewhere, or a potential hand that could feed them. Like the point is, they punch a certain class, and they won't do it. And this is clearly, from the NFL to just the medical class, because apparently the NFL is just pushing this all off on doctors. Like, we didn't say to do this, but if a doctor brought it up,
right?
I
mean, just Justin, it's like liberals believe in science, this is like the believe in science, like, discourse being taken to its like logical, disastrous ends, where it's
like believe in science, race science.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, liberals literally profess they had a march, like with no context, just like a march for science. Yeah. Like, what is that? I mean, even I guess that was just like a pure like expression of like the sort of group level psychosis from the Trump era that was like being caused by like, there was liberals were undergoing, I guess. And it's just but like the whole idea of just like abstractly believing in science. I mean, we should like believe in the scientific process and method and be guided by evidence-based like research. But the way that like science is also to completely just obfuscate the very horrific role of this scientific racism is played in this country by like using, beating around the bush, and by just embracing quote science like that, just unambiguously. It just shows like how the blind spots of elite liberals and the people that like aspire to all that stuff, and still act like that we're an imperfect nation just striving to live up to our founding principles, right?
And this kind of leads into like the next thing. I mean, this story leads for a reason, and how absolutely astoundingly disgusting this is. But the NFL is not the only sport that has problems. We know they all have problems, and I wanted to take a second to talk about baseball's problem with Marcell Ozuna this week. So Marcell Ozuna, if you don't know, played for the Marlins, played for the Cardinals, now plays for the Braves. He's, not the best left fielder, but he's got one hell of a bat. When he catches fire, he's a good ball player. That said, police walked into his house based on a phone call that was made, and saw him pick his wife up by her neck and slam her against a wall. They then took him and arrested him, got the story. There's his mugshot. It is the latest in a long line that baseball has with domestic violence. Couple of not so fun facts. Baseball didn't suspend a single player for domestic violence until 2016. Aroldis Chapman was the first to actually be suspended by the league. Now, it's not the first to face repercussions. Will Craferta, I believe was his name, was the first to be charged with a felony back in the 90s. But I mean, they did not suspend a player. Baseball didn't make a choice to suspend a player until 2016. This situation that Marcelo Ozuna got himself in was apparently all about doesn't matter. That's the thing, right? So many of the stories focus on there was an alleged infidelity, and there was I don't know, everyone I know has been cheated on. Not everyone I know has picked the person up by their neck and slammed them into a wall. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a scenario that plays out time and time again, but I want to focus on how baseball handles this and how they frame these stories, because this is immediately what I thought about when this came out. Was I can already hear the narratives for when he gets charged. Those charges will, most times they wind up being dropped. These two are married.
Yo, I gotta ask you. I wasn't aware of this from almost exactly a year ago. It says his wife was arrested for domestic violence last year.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, what's the context for this?
The context for this is that it's a pattern. You know what I mean? But at the same time, it's the violence in the direction, and then with him, when that happened. The Braves kind of took that, we stand by our player.
Well, hold on. It was his wife that got arrested here.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. And it's been, tumultuous at best, clearly. I mean, they both have had their run-ins. But my point is that the narrative for when he comes back, and that's baseball's problem. He will come back.
Right.
No matter what happens, he will come back, and they frame this in such a weird way. So you're a Yankees fan, Domingo Germán.
Yeah, that was disgusting.
And when they talk about this stuff,
and that was in public too.
And when they talk about this stuff, they never frame it from the standpoint of domestic violence being an issue. They always frame it from how's the locker room in the clubhouse going to receive him when he comes back? And it is this almost forgiving thing for something they didn't even suspend somebody for until 2016. You're telling me nobody, had domestic violence? I mean, I remember, this is a really distasteful joke, but I used to crack it. The year that Miguel Cabrera won the Triple Crown, I actually said he won the Quadruple Crown because he hit his wife more times that year than anybody.
Yeah.
Because he was notorious for that. He was getting arrested for it left and right. So it's been a problem, and it's a problem with how they handle when they come back, because inevitably they come back, and this isn't, and you'd read this and you'd be like, all right, he threatened to kill his wife. Cops literally watched him choke slam her into a wall. There's no way. This isn't even the worst that baseball's had to deal with.
Whoa. Let's to go off baseball for a minute. I mean, what about how with the NFL, they were suspending guys for longer for up until this year, marijuana, positive tests. Then Greg Hardy, at first they had to be kicked, screaming, dragging, clawing just to do the right thing as it related to what was it? Hardy got finally suspended 8 games of electrocuting his wife in a bathtub. Or his girl. I mean, it was the craziest, most vile stuff. And it just shows the mindset of a Jerry Jones that drugs bad. Oh, but that just, it's not domestic violence. It's sort of an older generation it's the same thing with the pedophilia stuff. It's you just don't talk about unpleasant stuff. That was the mentality, I think, of this, if something is just unseemly, we don't speak about those things, and it's that is a really messed up and terrible, way of dealing with life of just trying. And it's part of the reason we have all this discussion now about mental health awareness. And it is sort of funny too to hear so many people on ESPN and on mainstream sports media, and also from all these different teams, and really talking all this stuff about mental health and like how important it is, but it's like there's of course no discussion about what factors like cause mental health problems to begin with, and why there's such an issue, and what role employers play in those, in terms of expectations. So
in the framework, again, it comes down to that framework. I mean, and it's because I've had to hear it twice, I think, is why. Like I've had to hear this in 2 different games. I'm not like complaining like I had to be subjected to this. It's just you pick up on it when it just gets repeated in different games with different players. And they always frame it because Abdul Herrera was the other one. Just an absolute vicious attack on a woman. And again, they frame it still like watching, I watched the Cardinals play the Phillies 2 weeks ago, and they're framing it around, he really had to earn the trust back of the clubhouse. And you're just like,
yeah.
Like where does this framing come from?
Same thing with Domingo Herman. I mean, it was like, this spring, it was like, all about like how, he's, like really
not the fans, not the media, not the anything. How is his teammates going to look at him? Teammates are going to look at him whatever the owner says, and the owner says he can pitch, so we're going to pay him, and he's going to pitch. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, Zach Britton basically said the same thing when it came to like Domingo Herman, just sort of like. I guess you can't choose your teammates, like literally talk about not like just like being like, I'm not that stoked about having this guy on my team.
Yep, it was the same with Roberto Zuna. It was the same. It's the same with all of them, and they frame it all around the players forgiving, and it's like who needs to forgive him? First of all, the person they assaulted. That's the big one, and then. From there we work our way, but it's always like, how's the clubhouse? And it's like the clubhouse has no say, man. Like the owners, we know like how they feel about this. We know, that if you can still play and output, they'll find a way to work the narrative, however they need to work it to let you back in.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
unless it's substance abuse. And then, well, actually substance abuse in the term of who was the Dallas Cowboy offensive lineman, or defense, was it offensive or defensive, that drove drunk twice and like injured or killed someone twice before the NFL was like, yeah, you can't play.
Are you talking about Alden Smith? Or
This was
back in the day.
Yeah. This was 90s. Drove drunk twice.
Oh, was it Leon? Was it Leon Lett or Nate Newton?
Yeah.
Newton.
Leon. It was Lett. I think it was Lett.
All right. Let's see.
But it's like one of those things where it's like, how many times does this have to repeat, before you'll even like suspend? Because again, it's like, it's the what's a good old boy thing to do? Drink and drive and apparently beat a woman. You know what I mean? Like, and these are forgivable crimes. And it's insane.
Yeah, no doubt. Like I actually found like an article about that from 96, Leon Lett on the AP here. And, let's see.
I think the second time he killed a woman and her child. I mean, it was bad. Yeah, and it's you could have suspended him before this. It's not the first time. Not the first time.
Listen to this. So this is like an AP article from like 1996. It's like, and it's all just framed from the idea of like just what are the Cowboys going to do here? The Dallas Cowboys started the season without their best receiver because of an NFL drug suspension. And they'll finish the year without their best defensive lineman for the same reason. Tackle Leon Lett was suspended Tuesday for at least 1 year, effective immediately, for violating the league's drug policy a second time, right? So mind you that like that's an automatic year. And then when it gets to the other stuff, like almost killing somebody, they're going to bend over back. Jerry Jones will bend over backwards to make sure that like, it's as minimal as possible, right? You gotta be there for his guys. And then that'll be framed not in the light you're talking about, but it'll also be framed as like, oh, Jerry Jones, like he cares so much about helping like his
game
players.
A second chance.
Yeah. He's like, unlike these other like old school hardliners, he has a big heart and he wants to really like help guys like Michael Irvin. It's like the paternalistic like relationship in the way that Jerry Jones has like milked that Michael Irvin relationship, almost like portraying himself as like the father and this like lost child, the prodigal son, Michael, who he like, no, you gave him chance after chance. Like, I mean, and I don't have a problem with Michael Irvin, man. He has dealt the cocaine issues he had. He had a lot of issues, but he wasn't, and I don't, for as far as I know, he's never beaten on people. And he's also, I really respect the support he showed for his gay brother, and that stuff came out, and how he like really like used his voice to speak out and really kind of push back against some of the criticism, and also homophobia coming from people he knew and his brother had experienced back in their South Florida, community there. So I think that showed some courage back when he did it. But yeah, the idea of like Jerry Jones, I mean, he really, not just with Michael Irvin, but that's the one that really comes to mind. Like, has been able to like create this brand for himself as being like the owner who cares sort of thing. And I just think it's just absolutely disgusting. And it's like, and it obfuscates so many different things.
Yeah, he is. He's the owner. He's the owner who cares if you kneel.
Yeah, but that's unacceptable, Yeah. But Leon Nate Newton's got like bricks of stuff in his trunk, Right, we'll get that. We'll get that taken care of for you. So because it's not political. It's not political. He doesn't care. Like, he looks at Colin Kaepernick as like a far more disgusting, loathsome person than like he would view a Leon Lett. I mean, it didn't view Leon Lett for like
or Greg Hardy
or Greg Hardy. Yeah, even worse. So yeah, or Ray Rice. Ray Rice.
And the crazy thing about Greg Hardy was that like Greg Hardy did not just have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 instances. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, do you remember the time like he got arrested for just picking up a girl at a party and slamming her down on a couch full of guns? Yeah, like weird shit where you're just like, this is the weirdest sentence. Like, it's a sentence you don't imagine you'd ever read. And like he found himself in those. And it's like, when he left football and decided he was going to fight, his interview around that was simply because it was like, because I want to hurt people. Like, and they took football away. They took football away, and I have to do something else because I need to hurt people. And you're like, there's a pattern here. You know what I mean?
No, like, he's a sadistic, like, psycho, man. I mean, truly has I don't think he has any, like, human compassion, feeling, like, like ability to empathize type thing. I mean, I don't say that lightly because I don't like, I think that's crazy to pass that kind of judgment. But, like, actions speak louder than words is an idiom I believe in. And, with Greg Hardy, he's a scary cat. And like, and the idea that, I mean, he's already trying to, UFC it now. I mean, because he can't, his entire life is structured around violence, the need to like have an object, something to be the object of like him, delivering a beating to, type deal.
Yeah.
And it's,
he's U.S. foreign policy in an athlete. Like, it just has to hurt. He just has to hurt. You know what I mean? Like, it has to inflict. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry. Look at his eyes right there, man. I mean, this dude, like it looks like he's like, those are not even real. And he's just like ready to just like break your head, snap your head off or something. And of course, like now he's getting his kicks, like doing this, and this and whatever. So it's like, of course, this guy right here, his war paint, football and war, baby,
Yeah. Speaking of football and war, you sent me an article last night about football and class warfare that I'd love to talk about, because I think that no matter who's watching and where you're from, your state has this element to it.
Absolutely. So let me pull that up right now, and it'll let you kind of go, and then I'll respond. But yeah, this really is a good piece from 2015 in Slate. A lot of it hits home for me, given how much of it talks about Southern college football, and that being part of my background. But why Florida fans think FSU fans are dumb, how in-state college football rivalries became a form of class warfare. Like I said, it's from Slate, November 2015. So yeah, what were your reactions to this, Justin?
Yeah, so I guess being from Michigan originally, like I'm a part of two of these in a way. I don't like Ohio State, Michigan, or Michigan State, but but U of M, has a rivalry with each, and I know way more U of M fans than MSU fans. And it goes two ways, right? So there's the jokes that you make if you're Michigan fan and you talk about, MSU is, people go to Michigan State because they couldn't get into Michigan. That joke's been hammered through so many times. And on Oh man, your state is Canada. I'm sorry. There's got to be like Canada prep, like there's got to be like liberal arts schools and still agriculture schools in Canada. We'll get there. Sorry, Diego. That was on me for saying that our listeners all had states. Anyway, states or like listen, provincial Canada's got to have these. It has to have this, right? Like it has to. Anyway, but like the point is the point going back to, you know, and when we get to the article, we can talk about the land grant side of this. But like before we even get into that and explain it, I think that some people who don't even know about the land grant school side and the ag and the liberal arts side still just have the perception, even if they never ever knew anything about that there's like a dumb school and then there's like a smart school, or there's like a poor school or a rich school. And that separation is insane to see because there's so much more in common, you know, like somebody wearing an Ohio State shirt in a bar trying to start a fight, just like somebody wearing a U of M shirt in a bar trying to start a fight, because I grew up rural. And there's a lot of people wearing Michigan gear that didn't go to Michigan that are huge fans, but like they still like the similarity there that those two people have is way more than what they have not in common, but they focus on this hate and this rivalry that splits that up. And it kind of creates this class side to it, you know, when most college students, I mean, especially now, like if you're walking around, you know, I live in Indiana now, so it's like Purdue and IU, and IU is the liberal arts school and Purdue is the more ag, you know, engineering kind of school. You know, like both students are just walking around in debt. Like neither's walking around actually thinking, you know what I mean? Like that Hicks school up north or, you know, like preppy school down south, right?
Well,
like,
no, I mean there are people doing that, but it's a class. It's a class breakdown of who does it. I mean, it's like kids that are like in the Greek system. They like, you know, don't have to worry about student loan debts, and or like, you know, the scions of like at least some kind of business deal or inheriting land or whatever. I mean, I've kind of been around both scenes before, and like it's just totally different realities. I mean, the idea, that's why like a lot of times, like when people talk about leftists not liking sports, it's just an idea that a lot of people on the left that are like actually working class don't have the money to actually play ball in the game and to do the stuff that kind of makes it fun, that fans are like being able to travel to places, you know, like stay if you play. I mean, who actually has the means to be able to like think about like when the college football playoffs going on in like January, who are the Alabama and Clemson fans usually that are like traveling to like the college, not just like the SEC or ACC championship, college football playoff, and then the final. I mean, you're talking like, and they're just rolling. I mean, as if like cruising in on their wheels up, you know, little like rented private jet, or just, you know, flying first class. But it's a totally different consciousness. So like, yeah, they go back to like the Florida State thing. Florida State was Florida State College for women until 1947. So football started later. Until Bobby Bowden became the coach in 76. Like the team was like, after having some good years in the early 60s, the Fred Biletnikoff years and Ron Sellers, and they were really bad in the early to mid 70s. Bowden came in, and the next 34 years happened. I mean, a time when like, you know, there was like a 14-year run where FSU was like in the top 5 every year. I think it was just insane. Or like 14 straight top 10 finishes at least. It might have been, but it was like most of them were. Only a few were outside the top 5, actually. I mean, a small few, but nonetheless, like this plays in like Ole Miss. I think in Mississippi. I mean, like Mississippi State, seen as like the cow college with the cowbells. Literally, Ole Miss is like, you know, they wear ties, they wear like bow ties, they have like the fanciest. Like I'll pull up a picture here because I think this is like Ole Miss tailgating the Grove. I mean, it's like, so Ole Miss, they like fancy themselves as like basically as like the descendants of like the plantation aristocracy, the gentry, the landed gentry, the aristocracy, you know, like whether they are or they aren't. So you get like kids who like don't have the greatest grades from like out of state. If you go to like any kind of good private prep school or whatever, or even, you know, you got the money to pay for a lot of state tuition, man, they will take you. I mean, Ole Miss is, and the big thing here, you'll see like, you know, oh yeah, look at all that spread. We got like all, and where's Colonel Rebel here? They got,
of course he'll be there.
Yeah, I mean, of course with the Grove, like very very like white scene, of course, but like here we go. Yeah, a lot of little sorority stickers, this kind of crowd, and they'll all sit there and like tell you your jokes about Mississippi State and what a just a Cal college and how dumb you'd have to be to go to state, and and how they're like the people that even have money there are nouveau riche, and we're like the old money people. Perfect example, like just class and how this plays in formation of identity and using sports as a medium for that. I mean, look at these guys here. I mean, I'm sure they really care about there being like any kind of the problems that working class Americans are facing. I'm sure this guy right here absolutely gives a damn. He's probably out there fundraising for Tate Reeves, Mississippi governor, who's straight up reactionary. But that's the kind of scene you get there. And I don't know, in Alabama, it's a little different because but the thing is, like Auburn, Mississippi State, schools like Texas A&M. I mean, these are like agriculture, mechanical schools. So there's a class element with regards to like the lawyers, like the business class people, going to like in Alabama and Ole Miss, a Texas, whereas A&M, Mississippi State, Auburn. If you're a farmer, you're in agriculture, you're in mechanical engineering, that's where you would go. I mean, so there's so much of this. Like the Confederate battle flag was ubiquitous. It still is ubiquitous at Ole Miss. So that stuff. I mean, class plays a huge role in that. Oh, there's Colonel Rebel. Look at this tailgate here. Like you got your like plantation owner with his cane there, with this like chandelier inside your tailgating tent. I mean, like this is the alma mater of Eli Manning, Archie Manning, and a lot of others. So.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, and again, if where this comes from is it all comes down to that. What was a private school that was established and what was a land grant school? And the land grant, we won't even get into the fact that, like land grant, I love the gifted from the government. Where'd they get it? Anyway, we don't have to get into that. But
does it have something to do with the ethnic cleansing?
Exactly. So you give your stolen land and you give it away for, these schools that, like you said, focus on mechanical, focus on agricultural. Michigan State's one of the largest, I think the largest land grant school in the United States. Yeah. By acreage, Michigan State has more property than anybody else. Right. They have more acreage of farmland than any school, right? Things like that. And that sort of thing, when someone who goes there for agriculture, they come out extremely educated. You know what I mean? Like they're getting the best education they possibly can and go all the way through, on that. But the U of M grad's still going to look down on that. You know what I mean? Because the U of M grad, that they clearly weren't going for agriculture, they wouldn't have gone there. Yeah. And it creates that kind of divide. That sort of thing exists, which plays right into the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry as well, because Ohio State also land grant school. So Michigan has two rivalries of where they look down, on the other school in that way. And it's like, and I know grads being from Michigan, I know people who went to both. And again, they are far more similar than they ever will be different.
So, Justin, sorry to interrupt, but like Michigan also has a much more like out of state presence. I just know New York and New Jersey, there's like a lot of wealthy, like kids in like Long Island, parts of the Jersey suburbs that go to Michigan, that are proud to go to Michigan. Like Adam Schefter comes to mind, Michigan fan.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Rich Eisen from this area went to Michigan. But there's like, I mean, those are just some sports names. But like the reality is like Michigan is like and also maybe you could like talk about what it means to be a Michigan man and what does that actually entail? Like, how do you actually define a Michigan man, and how is that definition maybe tied up into like other definitions that are like very classist and maybe like patriarchal?
I gotta be honest, I can't define a Michigan man. I don't know what that means, because it just doesn't mean any. Like I don't.
Well, I'll tell you what I think it means. It means like that you're somebody that has like is traditional. Like is from the respectable class of people, the business class, the enterprising class, but you also have these principles of shared sacrifice when it comes to team, and it's sort of it's meant to sort of blur the class lines, but it's also very classist in nature. The idea of being a Michigan man, it separates them from everybody else that are their competitors.
Yeah, my Michigan connection is that, I was in middle school when the Fab Five happened, and that connected me to Michigan. But if you think about a group of people that face more vitriol from those donors, from those quote unquote Michigan men, the hate, you know what I mean? The absolute hate that those guys had to go through just playing there, and man, what a great time to be, a seventh grader, because the Fab Five were absolutely electric, and that was my big connection to Michigan, and that is a team I rooted for, But I've never had this connection to that Block M. But that Block M, just like the New York Yankees, just like the Dallas Cowboys, that Block M is one of the most recognizable and one of the most sold around the world emblems out there. It's crazy. Yeah. And overall success in sports has been, especially in football, has been non-existent for quite a while now, overall measured success. So, and it's still there. It's they're clinging on to that.
Yeah. So just to tell you, the Block M comes to this guy, Dave Brandon, the athletic director there for a long time. The connection to, Domino's Pizza in Ypsilanti, Michigan, I think started. The idea of using the Block M. I read a book actually, War as They Knew It, or no, sorry, what was it? But basically, I forget the name right now, but it was about Bo Schembechler and Woody Hayes and the 10 years that they, the 10-year war, I think it was, about the 10 games they went head to head as head coach of Michigan in Schembechler's case, and Woody in Ohio State, and Woody Hayes.
It would have gone longer, but kids, don't punch your players.
Yeah, no, not your players. The other teams linebacker. So that
did he punch? Oh, okay, so he did. I thought he punched one of his own. I can't even remember. That's how into that rivalry I am. Yeah, no, that's right. He punched a linebacker for Michigan.
No. It was in Jacksonville, Florida. And it was a Clemson player. It was just totally, bizarre and just
punch the player.
Yeah. Just let's see.
Woody Hayes' estate has scrubbed it. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, you got it. So let's see here.
Yeah.
So this quarterback for Ohio State too went to prison for all sorts of racketeering and got thrown out of the NFL basically. Art Schlichter. So total slime ball. But all right, so this was in Jacksonville, Florida. Ended up being Woody Hayes' last ever game, 1978 season. Ohio State, Clemson in the Gator Bowl on the banks of the St. Johns River in Jacksonville, Florida.
Is he just mad that he got the pick?
This is just so insane. It doesn't even make sense. Look at him here. So he's standing up there, and he's just gonna do this little it's sort of like a I'm gonna check this out right here. I'm sorry, but what in the world?
A college linebacker in such good shape, and you're an 80-year-old man, and you're gonna punch him and think it's wild.
And it's then he immediately has this thing in his mind where he's let me help just get him back and separate this and everything.
Yeah, he knew he lost it.
Get this crap.
10-year war would have been a longer war, but
would have been, no doubt. So, the whole thing, real quick. I gotta go back to this. Bo Schembechler. I want to tell you what is a Michigan man. All right, let's make sure people understand this. Let's try to define it. Justin Williams is a Michigan man in some way, but is he a Michigan? Yeah. But is he a Michigan man? No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team, the team, the team, the team. And if we think that way, all of us, everything that you do, you take into consideration what effect does it have on my team. So there you go. There he is chewing out Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah.
Who probably deserved it because it's Jim Harbaugh, but
yeah. You know, I mean, it's really funny. It's really funny to me because Michigan, you know, I remember there's still people all the way up until their most recent scandal. There's still people that talk about how mad they are that they didn't get Les Miles. And the only reason they didn't get Les Miles was
shut up. He's a Michigan man.
If you want to talk about, I was going to say, if you want to talk about like the arrogance, right? Like the arrogance of this school is to have Les Miles tell you in private, hey, I'm playing for the national title. Please don't go to the media and make me answer something about where I'm going to be next year. Can I just play for the national title and everything will be fine? And then the next day, the University of Michigan is like, we want Les Miles as our coach and we want him to accept the job like now. And of course, he's about to coach the national title game. So he's got to be like, yeah, I'm focused on the national title game. Yeah. So they literally thought they were arrogant enough they could get a coach the night before to just completely take the focus off of the game and his team. Turns out, you know, they dodged a huge bullet with Les Miles there, but you get what I'm saying. It's like the arrogance. Notre Dame has that same kind of arrogance where they'll like name a coach before they've even talked to that guy because they just think like we can get anybody.
Yeah, but they couldn't. Urban Meyer turned him down and shocked him. He actually took the Florida job over Notre Dame, and that very much wounded their pride. And as John Dolan, the war nerd, always says, that all nationalism is wounded nationalism. So Notre Dame nationalism took a hit there, and you know, but so that when you have wounded nationalism, then all sorts of craziness can ensue.
Yep. Right? And to get to Pseudonym's comment here with the Virginia Tech exactly having the same dynamic, and that's the exact point. We'll get to that real quick, but can I just before we get to that, just play a little intro here, like what this is.
That I really think is sort of plaguing Michigan football. And we're sort of stuck in doing the way we've done things for the last, I don't know how long, 50 years. Yes, I'm going to talk about what I like to call now the Michigan man syndrome. I know a lot of Michigan fans are going to say I'm full of it, but hear me out. And I think some of them actually will agree with me, though, because more and more Michigan fans that I talk to, my friends, kind of agree with this, that this Michigan man syndrome, Michigan really has to get past this if they're going to succeed on the field, which obviously has not happened really since the Lloyd Carr days. That hasn't happened.
Yeah.
Now, if you're not a Michigan fan, you probably don't know this story, so I'll give you a little bit of background. Bill Frieder was a pretty successful coach for Michigan in the 1980s, but he was really successful in recruiting. I mean, he was a dynamite recruiter. Michigan had some of the best basketball teams in the 80s, and certainly enough talent to scare you. I mean, people would see them when you see them on paper. I mean, he had some really good teams. In 1985, they were the number one. I don't know if they were the number one overall seed, but they were a number one seed. That tournament, I think Georgetown won it, or no, it was Villanova. Sorry, Villanova. But they had a top team and they got upset. So he always sort of had these teams that were underachieving. But I'm digressing. So the point I'm making is he had a real frosty relationship with Bo Schembechler. They did not get along. And I think either Frieder or Schembechler, I think it was Frieder, though, said he barely spoke even to.
It was because he wasn't recruiting Michigan men, Justin. They might have been great players, but we need Michigan men, too.
Sentences to Bo Schembechler during this era. They just were not friends. And it's sort of a stark contrast to what you see today with Tom Izzo. Now, I'm not a big fan of Tom Izzo, obviously, but
What's your Tom Izzo breakdown, Justin?
Oh, man, I have disliked Tom Izzo since day one, but also he's like the only person that just continues to assault his own employees and threaten physical violence on television, and he gets every pundit the next day to be like, he's got grit.
Oh, yeah. It's always he's got grit. He loves
He's so passionate.
He's just so passionate. He's just like, yeah, you're right.
He's held clenched fists to 18-year-olds' faces, and they're like, this guy, Ooh, he's passionate.
And then he'll gaslight people by getting like a former player or some high coach that's like, you know, kind of in his bag to say like, you know, there would be nothing more I'd love to send my boy to go play with Tom Izzo. You know, Tom Izzo helps make boys into men. You know, and that'll be the narrative, as if like he's just like, you got to understand that's part of the love, you know. Yeah, no, that's good point.
That's a dislike him very much.
I do admire him, and I really admire his overall spirit to the university. I mean, really good friends with the basketball coaches. They're all buddy, which I think is important. Well, that wasn't the case with Schembechler and Frieder. So, 1989, Michigan basketball is doing its usual thing. They have this awesome roster: Glenn Rice, Rumiel Robinson, Terry Mills. I mean, they're one of the
that was a great team.
And they're underachieving. They didn't win the Big Ten title. They lost. I think they lost to Illinois twice that year, pretty badly. But the key event was Bo Schembechler became athletic director, I think the year before in 1988. And of course,
this is Desmond Howard's freshman year too.
Just didn't want to work under Bo Schembechler. That was obviously the main thing behind this. So on the eve of the tournament, this was really crazy. Literally on the eve of the 1989 NCAA tournament, Frieder accepted a job at Arizona State. And this was really sort of a shocking.
Yo, that's insane to like leave your team like when the tournament started.
Yep. Well, you know what? But it worked out in the end for Michigan.
You know, I'm gonna that worked out. I mean, but I think
spoiler alert, they got Fisher. He was an amazing coach. He recruited the Fab Five, and they went on to do what they did. So
but still, it is interesting that a guy that plays up this classist notion of a Michigan man. It's like, when you think of it, I guarantee you, when people say that, they're not picturing a non-white guy. They're picturing a white guy with a Letterman's jacket on from like a small town or the suburbs who says yes sir and no sir and you know holds doors open for the old ladies and like, but also
real 50s bullshit,
right? But also crushes the competition on the field and plays fair in business and has good business ethics. You know, just like American is apple pie. I can just see David Lynch making like some film. Like this essentially going in on the idea of the idyllic Ann Arbor. With its sheriff, or constable of Bo Schembechler policing the Michigan men. Whether or not you're a Michigan man can enter, Schembechler Hall, which is named for him now. So I'll get off this side, but
So I mean, and just to kind of drive this home, right? So the Virginia Tech thing was brought up, and like that's kind of the point is that this isn't like we're talking about the ones like me growing up in Michigan. Nate growing up in Florida, we all have that thing that we connect to, but the idea is that this is everywhere. This exists everywhere, and like it even exists between like USC and UCLA, and like neither one's an ag school. You know what I mean? It exists.
There's dynamics there. UCLA is like the better school. USC is like called University of Spoiled Children. By UCLA.
It's one of the most expensive universities in the country,
USC is, but UCLA is a better school. It has a higher caliber student overall. I mean, but they're a public institution. But then you have the irony with that is that USC is like kind of in South Central Los Angeles, where UCLA is in the poshest neighborhood of maybe in the whole United States. I mean, you're talking about Westwood. You're going out there near on the way out to Santa Monica, some Brentwood's right near there. It's that's nothing else. But anyways, let me actually, this piece is short. I think it's worthwhile. I also want to mention real quick that the Virginia Tech thing that's next level. I mean, my dad went to UVA. He said he felt uncomfortable there because just in terms of people would talk. I mean, it was like Virginia Tech. If you just listen to the way classist UVA students would talk about it. It was called VPI back then. It still is technically Virginia Polytechnical Institute. Mm-hmm. And they've kind of gone with Virginia Tech for branding reasons. But, it was just sort of like jokes like, how do you get to Blacksburg? You take a right turn until you start to smell it. Then you take a left and then you realize you stepped in it. Talk about the cow field or something. I mean, I might have messed that up a little bit, but it's the same thing even with South Carolina and Clemson, and USC is like, it's the liberal arts, kind of like the flagship school, and Clemson was like, historically the Cal College. It's funny how like those are just absurd, designations almost now, because like it's harder to get into Clemson than it is even to get into Carolina, and it's also
And it's just it's everywhere, and I don't think we need to like dissect the article too bad or too far. It's just one of those things where like this is where it comes from. It comes from, like literally being the agricultural farm school, which, like I said, it was so many of these don't even play today. You know what I mean? Like that part of it's gone. Like there are certain parts that stay there, but like for the most part, it all came down to, you had these private institutions that were already there, and then you had these land grant schools, and the divide that comes with that, you could either afford to go to the private school or you can go to the public school. You can, go become a lawyer or a doctor. Like you can go to IU here in Indiana and become the lawyer or the doctor, or you can go to Purdue and get your 4-year degree in an ag science. You know what I mean?
So,
like that,
absolutely.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so let me just mention a few highlights then. All right, we'll go on. Like, here we go. Marco Rubio. So Florida State battles Florida in a rivalry that inspired Florida Senator Marco Rubio to quip that he doesn't have anything against Florida State because, quote, there has to be a school where people that can't get into Florida can go to college. Yeah. So then, of course, we talked about enough about Ohio State, Michigan. So going down here, let's look at this right here, because this is particularly interesting here. It gets into like an Academy of Management journal paper about which is basically about researchers kind of looking at like rivalries and really analyzing them and how they help factor into how people see themselves, how people like identify with themselves, what groups they feel like they're part of. So the 2015 article like cited the importance of frequent competition, proximity, and balanced competitiveness, but also identify cultural factors, both cultural similarities and cultural differences between groups of fans as influential in rivalry creation. It goes on, it's not hard to see how culture plays a part here. In sociological and psychological terms, human beings have a well-known tendency to think of ourselves as being part of in-groups, which we constantly compare to out-groups, right? And this is sort of like the keeping up with the Joneses syndrome, where people like, you're always kind of like looking upward to try to, you're not thinking about what you be grateful for what you have. And like, it's always like, I got to get more. I got to like, this guy's got this. So I got to, make sure I show that, he doesn't show me up, it's just totally the third way to think about things. But it goes on to talk about, as we like to think of ourselves as being both different from and superior to those other groups. It gets in, it kind of put it this way, like emphasizing that we talked about Mississippi State and Ole Miss. So to put it another way, we engage in the narcissism of minor differences because we all want to be special snowflakes, Justin.
Yep. Because again, we can't think about the things that make us similar. It's no different than how they can easily sell, like the idea, the racist idea of who stole your job. Right. Or dehumanizing, people overseas, I'm one of, I don't know how many Americans actually, but I like to like think of myself as like, it's probably a really small group that's actually been to Iran. Right. Like there's the idea when you get,
wait, when did you go to Iran, Justin?
I went to Iran in 2005.
All right. Man, you gotta break that. You gotta break that down for our.
Yeah, we can chat about that. It was fun. Went to Georgia to work on a film, in a small crew role.
And the country that would be the country of Georgia.
Yeah, it'd be really weird if I went from
Iran to Athens, Georgia, man, to watch the dogs play. Yeah.
No, but there was another grip on that set that was from Iran, and I really wanted to go, and he was like, we can do this. Like, this is easy. This is absolutely easy. But anyway, I spent a few days in Tehran and just absolutely like the people, you know what I mean? Like, again, it's not what we're sold constantly because again, we're sold whatever difference. Well, I think in foreign policy case, we make up a lot of difference, right? Like it's not even a difference. Like we just make shit up.
Right.
But anyway, the idea is that you have an idea in your head. I was never the type of person to be like, yeah, I believe that shit, you know. So you want to go and check things out for yourself. And you know, I always say I've been to 2 places in the region, and it's Dubai and Tehran. And then I quiz people and I say, which one do you think was the authoritarian like nightmare that I hated? And they're always like Tehran, and I'm like, I'm fucking wrong.
Yeah,
like
no,
is it a nightmare?
And what about how they'll always say the hardliners in Tehran?
Yeah, you know. So anyway, but like this sort of shit, right, goes all the way down to things like this Virginia Tech, this Michigan, Ohio State, this Florida State, like goes all the way down to that, where if you're going to look for how we're different, then you're adversarial from the fucking start.
Yeah.
You know, like you started from an adversarial place.
Yeah.
And
I mean, we'll think about how much more in common Auburn and Alabama players playing each other have with each other than they do the fans that they're, you know, the most of the fans pulling for them. Like overwhelming majority of the fans pulling for them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, both Alabama and Auburn have something huge in common. They have these massive white racist fan bases that are watching players of color settle their rivalry for them. You know, like, yeah. Anyway, I took that to that place. But you know what I mean? Like the point is that it's the similarities, not the differences, you know, and this idea that, you know, rich school, poor school, smart school, dumb school.
Yeah, no, it's not even funny anymore. It's like I've heard stuff like that. It's usually like goofy dudes who like don't like have that much interesting to say anyways. So it's like they're trying to find some way to like make a connection or like break the ice or something. So it's like, oh, you're pretty smart for a Mississippi State grad. Or, I mean, oh, you get it?
Yeah.
That's a Cal college, man. Like,
you know, it's funny that there's all this Florida divide because my dad's a Michigan man. I'm just kidding. He's not a Michigan man. But anyway, you know, but at the same time, he is a boomer, clearly, you know. I mean, he's 66 years old. So he has all the tropes being from Michigan. He has all these tropes about the Florida schools just all being the same. Right. So, you know, it's funny. It's funny then to like hear the perspective, like watching this of like then being like, well, within these other states, all this dynamic exists everywhere.
Well, yeah.
Right.
And I don't know if you know this, Justin, but I mean, do you know about Barners and Bammers and the distinction?
I do not. Let's talk about Barners and Bammers.
So, like Barners and Bammers are like, so a Barner is if you go to Auburn, and a Bammer is if you go to Bama. So like, that's like something that like, and the Barner thing comes into like, again, the Cal college sort of aspect of it. And like the idea of it's like Bama fans started kind of derisively calling Auburn fans Barners as a way to like, be like, you know, they're farmers, you know, and that's like, that sucks. So.
I grew up on a farm. It was fucking awesome.
Well, yeah, like... but you're not part of the leisure class, Justin. You're not. Yeah. You know, it's like you got to if you want to. I mean, and you can't earn your way into it either. You know, it's like you got to be born kind of from, you know, into the right stock. You know, and it's just it's our Southern way of life. So don't call us racist. We're just preserving our heritage. You know, even if our heritage is racist, but like, you know,
these are the. Right, yeah. These are the same type of people that use the phrase if you leave a door open if you were born in a barn, but that doesn't make any sense because if you grew up on a farm, you understood if you left a barn door open, then all your livestock gets out, and that's really counterproductive. So if anything, you'd be better at closing doors. I just don't think.
Yeah. So, anyways, let me just. Yeah, you're right. And I'm gonna go back to the Slate article real quick because I want to bring into the land grant stuff just for a moment here or two because this is important. In the context, the United States system of higher education seems almost perfectly constructed to produce high intensity sports rivalries. In 1862, mindful of how the U.S. slid this land grant thing in there in the middle of the Civil War when everyone's distracted, of course. Congress's Morrill Land Grant College Act set up a program that gave federal public land to individual states in exchange for agreements to set up universities that would specialize in agricultural and mechanical arts. Quote, public land here is, of course, a euphemism for stolen land, but because that's another story. Well, there's a link to it, so I don't know. Justin probably can outline that pretty well for us here in a second. But these land-grant colleges, including, just to pick some, you know, random examples, like we've talked about Mississippi State, Auburn, and Ohio State, were often located in the vicinity of older, prestigious liberal arts schools. A few decades later, institutions of both types would be caught up in America's football craze, which actually began on college campuses, launching an association between secondary education and big-time sports. Many close together schools naturally settled into a habit of playing football every year, traditions that are now in some cases more than 100 years old. Thus, in-group, out-group relationships were created between groups of students who had a lot in common, except for the fact that some of them were liberal arts schools and the others went to what was originally a farm school. Is it any surprise that a number of rivalries evolved in which one side saw itself as smarter and more distinguished, while the other side took pride in being the salt of the earth? In cases where the liberal arts / agricultural dichotomy isn't in play, considerations, issues of condescension and the resentment thereof have still developed. Florida fans once looked down on Florida State because it had been a women's school for several decades. And I can speak to that personally. Growing up, a Gator fan, actually, and just hearing so much of the discourse around Florida State, and often, like, you just hear this a lot growing up, like, oh, yeah, that's just like a girls' school or something, as if, like, it's just, like, first of all, just insanely dumb. I mean, and as if that's supposed to be an insult, first of all. And then secondly, yeah, it's been co-ed since 1947. But just an example of just, like, absurd stuff people say to kind of, like, contribute to rivalry discourse, we can call it. But I'll stop there, man. It's just enough to chew on. I mean, this whole idea, I think it is interesting, too, because the solidarity that exists is really a class solidarity. I mean, the fans of Alabama and Auburn, for instance, hate each other, right? In terms of football, but it's really them as a class. The winner of that game is a victory for that element of the ruling class, that element of the bourgeoisie. Like, you just don't have like proletarian fans, maybe a few in the upper deck, but it's a culture that is about, these kind of superficial differences, and then the labor on the field is just like the means of of playing those out. And then so they're literally living vicariously through the overwhelmingly predominantly black labor, on the field, and having that define their sense of self-esteem, self-worth, the nature of conversation for the whole next year. It's a fascinating, just dynamic to really discuss, but it's also really gets into a lot of, it's not just you talk about racism, how it's not just in the past. It's a living, breathing example of how, the racism of America's origin, not only creeps into the present, is front and center in the present. And ironically, this whole Cal College type discourse of schools like Alabama, Ole Miss, UVA, Chapel Hill, UNC Chapel Hill says that much of the same things about NC State. Another example right there. NC State is mechanical agricultural school. The irony is, with in this era of STEM now in landowning, is that many of these quote unquote agricultural schools and mechanical schools that are considered inferior culturally by the flagship university people, whether it be University of Alabama or University of Mississippi, aka Ole Miss, or Michigan, if you're that. Well, it's not really the case there, but I know in Alabama that Auburn is I think more competitive to get into. I think the same is true with Clemson, and Texas A&M is a highly competitive school actually. But that speaks to sort of the emergence of the obsession of STEM. And I really trace, Justin, I don't know if I'm going to get your take on this. Yeah. I think a lot of the obsession over STEM education in the U.S. is very much an expression of new Cold War politics and fear and anxiety of being surpassed by China. Right?
Yeah. And not only that, but, having, spent some time working for one of the large tech companies, it comes down to why they all want to get into charter schools anyway. They want a better employee, and by better employee, they want employees to make them profit by being geared around this. It's not STEM for the sake of STEM, right? It's not we want you to go into these fields because it betters people. Now they have the potential to do that. This is not I'm not shitting on STEM here. In no way. It is so important. But at the same time, it is the center of profit right now. It is just absolutely the crux of where these people make their money. And they want this level of employee, which is why, I think I've talked about this a little before, but never as much as I wanted to, because it's one of my favorite things to talk about, and that is the deals that were thrown out there just to get HQ2 right for Amazon, which were they let a state like I'm trying to think which state, I think it was North Carolina, threw this out there. North Carolina and their crazy ass offer, right? Because that was a bum fight. Like that was literally just a fight to the bottom.
And North Carolina is one of the most anti-union states ever created.
So it's one of those things where North Carolina wrote in their proposal that not only will they switch their education all over to charter, but then anyone who worked for Amazon would then get prime placement for their kids in these schools. But the idea is, and the reason that Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos care so much about education is they want a better worker. Like they want to be able to take the things. I mean, it's not like any of us here in America. I don't want to speak for the one person up in Canada, but like here in America, like the public education, you're not going to get good history. You're going to get mythology. You're not going to get, you know what I mean? Like you're not coming out like well-rounded. It's still geared towards work, but it's not geared towards
Justin, chill out. We're teaching critical race theory.
Yeah. All right. So, so the idea is that we like public schools here. It's not like I'm saying like public school over charter school, like, and you can speak to this as a teacher, right? Like, and I'd love to hear that perspective, but it's like, we are schools and it's always been about gearing you for work. But like these tech billionaires, they want a better worker. They want a better worker than public school. Like they want you already prepared for this industry. They want you prepared for this modern consumerist, this is what we're living in now. We're not living in, where I went to high school, I graduated with like 68 people. You know what I mean? It's tiny, like there was no STEM, like nothing. You were lucky to get a computer class and learn how to type properly, and that was it. And that's what they see they can make a difference in with this. And that's like the STEM thing. And like Neil, like it's all good, like being a STEM major. Like, again, I'm not shitting on STEM. It's that I feel like STEM is so important and it could be valuable. And it is so valuable to how we fix these issues. But like these assholes that are pushing it, though, the agenda that's pushing STEM isn't for those reasons. It's for profit. It is for purely, it's what we want. Like, in my industry, in film and television, like that shit is all pushing towards STEM. Like the links between STEM and Marvel is insane. And that link is there because, again, it's a better class of worker. Like this is how integrated it is to where, you have all of these DoD contracts with the Marvel movies, but you also have all of these STEM contracts with the Marvel movies because they want to push that, and they're pushing this, and they're pushing it for a reason. Anyway, I'd love to hear your take on the school thing, right? Because like I feel like, I would have loved to have you as a teacher, like when I was a kid, like, like I can only imagine like how awesome that has to be to have that teacher. But like that's like that 1 in a million, cases where you have a teacher, but even then, like there has to be limitations that are put on you. And like I'm just always been curious about that because it's got to be hard because, again, they're just gearing you for work. It's just these tech billionaires just want a better worker geared for them.
Yeah, you have no idea how much I think about this stuff. While I'm like literally proctoring the SAT or AP exams, just like walking in rows up and down, observing freaking out children, high school students who feel like their life is being like the future trajectory of their life is like taking shape. It's taking shape.
Hey, when you say freaking out kids, I just want to know, like, can we just go over like your height really quick? Because some people might not know. Like, you're an intimidating human.
I'm like just under 6'7", so measurements, officially would be like 6'6", 7/8 of an inch. There you go, something like that.
I'm just saying, yeah. I just want people to get that context. When you say freaking out kids, it's not just they could get caught cheating. You're also just a physically intimidating person.
Well, no, I'm not even talking about me really. I think they're more focused on just what they're doing. I just think like they're freaking out more than in the sense of like they're freaking out because of like, I mean, at least where I taught for 4 years. I mean, at McNair Academic High School. I mean, it's like taught really kids. A lot of kids are in Ivy League schools and whatnot now. I mean, just all sorts of like schools that, but like there's a lot of working class kids, a lot of first and second generation immigrant kids. But it's like, they were like. The idea was like this sort of like zero-sum game. It's like liberal arts versus STEM. And I mean, I reject that dichotomy. I think it's just another example of superficial distinctions. And I think that like, comprehensive, well-rounded education is what you should look at, but also look at like what thankfully is happening now, not for the right reasons. I mean, it's more so the reasons that Justin just laid out about the business community needing workers that have the skills that they need to like help their profitability, not just stay what it is, but grow and avoid like a decline. Of course, that's like the number one thing. But this whole like, let's see here. Yeah, I mean, this whole notion though of the STEM thing and it being like so central. STEM is like Justin said, critically important. I mean, you talk about like China's growth. You talk about growth under the socialist planning and the way that that's been able to like take China from being one of the poorest countries on earth, emerging out of the century of shame. They call it, really started in the 1840s up until the 1949 revolution, of the opium wars, of like having all the being having such a huge percentage of population enslaved to like addiction by way of the British Empire, and an empire that's never talked about in Western like mainstream discourse as being like genocidal, even though it's like one of the most genocidal entities like the world's ever known. I mean, and just talk about erasure. I mean, it's like I don't even know where to begin there. I mean, it's like, but the STEM stuff is like so many kids feel like they got to pick something so early now and become like so specialized. But where's that pressure coming from? Well, it's coming from parents, but those parents are like a lot of times, especially ones that are immigrants themselves and like have so much banking on a decision to leave everything they left behind and everything they know behind them and try to be successful. And it's easy to make fun of like you hear all this like tiger mom stuff, which like the more I think about it really is a racist type way of looking at it. I mean, there is like some reality in Asian, East Asian kids will talk about it, but I don't know. They'll say that like, oh yeah, I have like my strict Asian mom and stuff. But I mean, a lot of that's them projecting like the same kind of like discourse they're hearing, right? And just sort of trying to make jokes about it, even though it really is like fundamentally, because it posits this notion of like it presents like an American identity that's like as if it's some like singular thing, like the Americans that don't want to like that aren't that concerned about education and reading and all that. It totally like obscures like the totally just absurdly class fragmented nature of U.S. society, and in terms of like the juxtaposing the tiger mom of East Asia or whatever to like the more laid back Western like enlightened parents that are like friends with their kids, I guess, and like are just like buddy, and it's just like no, that's like a privilege that people of a certain class have to act like that other people aren't afforded, because they have like real shit they got to take care of. So this notion, man, that like that these like this you see it in media propagated a lot, but and also that in this in entertainment media specifically, and it's like the sort of like the cool, relaxed Western parent who's like, but that sort of image, man, is totally predicated on the class hierarchy that exists in this country, like staying that way and being that way. And that enables that leisure class to develop, and with it the poses and the ideological assumptions and beliefs and everything else, man. So like that's there's a lot there, but the reason STEM is being pushed is superficial reasons, man, and it's being put. It's not superficial. It's very like plain. What they're portraying it as is superficial. It's like it's like yes, it can be like oh, look at the commercials you see, like, oh, like robotics teams doing all this. What they're not telling you, I hate to see it. It's like I see kids get into robotics and they're like really, and my fear always is like when you hear like a genius type kid who's doing all that, I taught some of them, man. And it's like, is that, man, wait till like Raytheon and Lockheed and all of them come calling, because those are the kids that they target and they bring in and they use to, and they pay a shit ton of money to like keep the competitive advantage up for U.S. empire, aka the DOD, the Pentagon, and the endless, never-ending hole of money that goes into these contractors. They can't even audit themselves. They can't even like really begin the process or make sense of like all the ledgers and like the expense report. It doesn't even. That's how insane. And how just like it's not even, I don't even know that our brains are capable of processing the amount of just like economic, like just, power that's put into like that entity. And I'd say power in the form of like, real money and shit that like that makes shit move in this country. So it's, man, that's why education's been, it all goes back to like creating these false, like, imagined communities, man. That's sort of a theme. Like, I mean, they're just, I mean, all right, it's not, there's there's a clear difference between the kind of fanhood we're talking about in college football with these elitist types, that are like, the types that go to fraternities, sororities, prominent positions, use it as a way to like, build up their business connections, relationships, or maybe it was a mechanical contractor, engineer, or whatever. Yeah. And that's their network that serves them the rest of their life. That's why it's so quintessentially bourgeois. And like, and the only reason that they like actually integrated in the first place, like in the late 60s, early 70s, talking about Southern college football, was just the competitive advantage part. And they're really just like purely, it's like, it brings you back to like a William Faulkner and Absalom talks about this, like, totally ravenous, like guy who's from a lower class white guy, and he's disrespected as a kid by having to walk around to the back door. And it was like a black butler who was enslaved at the time, telling him to walk around to the back door. And he like, his whole motivation is about like trying to like make up for that injustice, that indignity of like, the black butler, actually thinking he's better than me. How dare that? And it's like, as a result, he dedicates his life to like making sure he gets the biggest, the strongest, enslaved people and like and black people, and he ends up like the reason this is relevant is like the way he ingratiated himself into the Mississippi community that Thomas Sutpen was trying to become connected to and had bought a bunch of land in the fictional story Absalom, that is by putting on these slave fights. All right, getting the strongest, the baddest, the toughest, like enslaved men, right? And then letting the wealthy landowning class, the aristocracy, the gentry, whatever you want to call it in that time, that's how he kind of gained quasi acceptance into the club. He still wasn't the old money, like you can't earn your way into our club mentality, which is something that is very pervasive and like, especially cultures that are provincial but view themselves as like, like blood is such an important, like bloodlines are so important, I mean, it's not hard to draw parallels, connections from there, but that's
bringing it all full circle.
Man,
bringing it all full circle in our very first story.
But the idea of your heritage, man, and how much that means, and that being something that, like, the reason I'm using the blood analogy is like that you can't earn your way into. You hear that with these like high society clubs. I know like the St. Cecilia Society in Charleston. You have to be like a 12th generation Charlestonian, and they love that their motto is like, you can't earn your way into the St. Cecilia Society, right? So there you have it. I mean,
it's crazy.
Class solidarity, man. Class solidarity is essential.
And that's what it needs to be. And also, and like, that's the thing, right? Is that as class solidarity is something that never ends. So that is that if you bump from low to like low middle, you don't forget about the low, but this system's predicated on you forgetting about the low, right? You lifted yourself up. So therefore, fuck those people, like you moved on, and maintaining that solidarity. And as you continue to rise, you just continue to leave people behind. And that's the real rub, right? Like that you can get away with so much, and this system can get away with so much if people just do that. Yeah. And the idea is, and how to fight that is to, first of all, always punch up, like, right? Like going back to like, you know, when we were talking about, you know, like why they don't talk about why the media won't frame things correctly is because they cannot punch up. They just won't do it. Like, and we need to do it. Always punch up and never punch down. The number one thing we can do to like build solidarity is stop punching down. Like if there's one thing every single person can do right now, stop punching down. Like there is nothing to gain from that, but they want you to punch down. Like they want you to.
No, you're right. Like go after someone who's like, you know, doesn't actually hold any real power, and make that like your number one thing. You're gonna do like a YouTube channel or whatever, and you're doing a video breakdown of like some other YouTuber man who's like got it all wrong. It's like, I mean, it's all right to criticize people, but make that criticism in the context of like calling out somebody else who like is in power, right? That needs to be held to account. And then use that platform you got to help organize people and inspire people to organize into like, you know, developing alliances and actual real tangible like organizations in their own communities around those kind of demands, right? That you're kind of centering in your discussion. So that, I mean, absolutely. I hear like many.
It's impossible to, it's impossible to. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's impossible to punch down if you look at the material causes. You know what I mean? Like, you know, it's like fundamentals of just being a leftist, right? Is like,
right. Well,
you know, this idea of looking at those material causes, and if you do, you'll find who to punch at, and I guarantee you, it's above you. It's not below you.
Yeah, I mean, and I hope people realize by pointing out like just how bourgeois solidarity is developed and how like it's able to be maintained. That like that's what you're up against, right? They are class conscious, right? The ones who actually make decisions, the ones that are like looking at things from like the interests of their class, not just like narrowly themselves. And that is sort of the old money, new money breakdown. The nouveau riche is concerned about just like, you know, the whole stereotypes, being gaudy, getting as much stuff as you can, not having class, you know, all that kind of stuff. You know, the Southern aristocracy really like fancied themselves as like, you know, going back. That's why they were so obsessed with like all things French and like, you know, having like fine, you know, furniture and decor and whatnot from Europe, and like and having relationships and alliances with old Europe, old aristocracy, like landed gentry types over in Europe, because they fancied themselves as like as being that, you know, ironically, even though they kind of they came to America because they weren't that, you know.
Exactly.
Right? So that's sort of the irony there, but you know, it just shows how, you know, those interests that are based on exploitation, fundamentally, that are based on like the need to continue to exploit and extract as much as possible out of human labor in the case of slavery and then sharecropping. It's not like hard to see at all how that then leads to grotesque like mass level like political views. Like when I say mass level, I mean like mass level from within like their class, right? And they propagate that through media arms that they own and that they invest in and they develop. Go ahead. I just want to say about my trip to Washington. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to throw out before we get to that, because I'd like to hear about that too. But before we get to that, you mentioned something real quick earlier. You mentioned something about you know, China and their ability to grow, and I just want to throw out friend of the show. Friends of the show, Max and Ben over at Moderate Rebels had an amazing interview with Michael Hudson, and I suggest everybody listen to that. That I don't know if you heard that one, but
I've heard my. He's a repeat guest. I mean, I've like before.
Yeah. So it's the most recent one though. Yeah. I mean, it just was. You touched on something that made me think about it, and I was like, don't forget to throw that out there, because it is worth everyone listening. I mean, it really.
No. Michael Hudson breaks it down like You can't, man. I mean, it's
Yeah.
so yeah, definitely check that out. But yeah, Washington was great. I mean, speaking of that, I mean, I was down there visiting our friends, Max Blumenthal and Anya and Parampil, and we were out there for Palestine too on Saturday, and where you saw a lot of people, did a lot of engagement. It was great to see so many people out, like in front of the Lincoln Memorial there in DC. Standing up for Palestine after this quote ceasefire, was brokered. So it's, I just think it's like a powerful testament to, ceasefire, right? In air quotes, and but it's a testament to how things have changed now. How I think that people are waking up about the reality of Palestine and the reality that and I think being revolted more than anything by the continued and persistent exploitation of anti-Semitism and really bastardizing what the word means. And there really are anti-Semites out there, but in trying to then just cheapen it so much by throwing it around, in the interest of scaring people was a McCarthyite tactic from being critical of an objectively, genocidal apartheid state now. I mean, what is happening in Gaza? I don't know how you call it anything else. It's a slow death for so many people. I mean, the level of just hopelessness, despair, just human misery, lack of being able to live. I mean, people that have lost everything. And then, so much of the Palestine, solidarity movement in the States, sometimes even I think in making it so much about the human rights grounds and arguments and just winning the argument, loses the fact that these are abstractions to the people living in Gaza, people that have this is just the latest in a long line of these Israeli bombardments, as Dove Weisglass calls them, mowing the lawn, a way to every so often kind of keep your ghettoized population under control. I mean, that's they do that every few years, and then there's always a pretext. It's always rockets from Hamas, these epithets that are used consistently across mainstream media to basically condition people to not be upset about the loss of life, to devalue the life of Palestinians inherently, because of course they're all Hamas, right? They're all there's something that's not quite the level of humanity that the way that people, at least the media pushes it, the way they're trying to get people to think about Israeli society, right? That it's something we can identify with in the West, and they're being surrounded by the hordes are just trying to invade, right at the town walls, and the reality is the rest of the surrounding region is in that situation because of Israeli aggression, and they're complete their policy of taking no other line other than trying to destabilize and weaken every potential regional rival they could have. It's behind the whole reason they actually side with ISIS and other Salafi jihadist groups in Syria and Iraq, because it's the reason they were so behind the idea of toppling Saddam Hussein. It's not Saddam Hussein, was a brute. I mean, not a good guy, but the reality is they wanted him out, not because of that. They wanted him out because of his unwillingness to bend the knee, right?
Hey,
in the kiss the ring.
That man had a key to the city of Detroit.
Saddam Hussein did, yeah. Yeah, man, a lot in the drug game calling themselves Bin Laden, Saddam, just to be I'm the baddest mofo, so that sort of thing, and
it's one of those things that that just goes with our continued hypocrisy. But I just always like to throw out, whenever somebody just even mentions his name, just like to throw out that he was given the key to the city of Detroit, because when he was doing shit for us.
Oh yeah, killing Iranians, right?
Yeah,
and the U.S. national security state, the deep state, whatever you want to call it, the state that propagates permanent war, that pushes the lines on that are part of the Washington consensus, bipartisan consensus, with regards to Iranian aggression in the region, Iranian proxies, right, surrounding and threatening Israel. Who's just sitting there trying to live in peace, if not for all these violent, Iranian proxies, around them, who don't have any autonomy of their own, right? Don't have any agency of their own,
do
right?
We have? You know what I mean? Like it's like I really want to write a piece like about all of the proxies we have.
What about the Honduran government of like Juan Orlando Hernandez and his brother Tony, who's like a DEA custody being charged like a drug kingpin? But the country of Honduras essentially used as just a staging ground for imperialism. I mean, the whole ousting of Manuel Zelaya and like the rise of like in the region too, like MS-13, in Salvador, and like and then the way these are created due to direct U.S. engagement in that region, and then we want to sit there and blame and not give them refugee status, right?
Well, and that's the crazy thing about it, right? Is that part, right? Like, and that narrative of like, I'm not against, immigration and people coming in, but do it the right way. So then they come here and they go, okay, so I'll do this the right way. I will say, violence pushed me out of my country. Like absolute violence. Violence did. The fact that there are groups of people going around and they're killing indigenous, they're killing poor, and they're, indigenous and poor have something in common, and that is that they tend to be more left. So you're essentially eradicating your left base. So I left my country because of that. And the US goes, goddamn, that sucks that you said that, because see, we don't recognize that is actually happening in your country, because to recognize that officially on this document would then make us implicit into what we're doing and how we're creating it. So asylum denied. That bullshit, that play that they make about the proper way, but then literally not recognizing the proper way because the proper way would then make us complicit. Like that shit drives me absolutely insane when somebody brings up the idea of there's a right way to come to this country. There's a right way. Yeah. Yep. They can't do the right way. Yeah, because we block that right way, because we won't recognize that we've destroyed their country and that we've caused this, so they don't actually officially recognize that. You can't say like an MS-13 violence is what pushed you out, because then that's an acknowledgement that we created the grounds for this to happen.
Right. And we won't do it. You're right. And liberals want to make they just almost have a fetish for the idea of just, welcome immigrants, welcome. But it's like, they're not welcoming immigrants in just some sort of way. Like it's just about them feeling better, stroking their own personal ego. What the problem is with that is that it ignores the reality that most people, the vast majority of immigrants, are not leaving because they just want to and they just love America so much. They're fleeing literal shit like U.S. foreign policy's created. So we shouldn't just be only speaking from the idea of accepting more immigrants and whatnot, which we should do, obviously, and we need to give people asylum. But if that's not also matched up, accompanied by a discussion about why are we constantly forcing people to have to flee who don't even want to only come to a place where then people say this ridiculous type of, racist just bullshit constantly about, immigrants and and the way that the dehumanizing, just normalized rhetoric there is in the U.S. about immigrants invading our country or whatever, as if they're just all dying to come here and be part of a country that's extraordinarily racist against them and is literally contributed, not just contributed, is a direct result of their country being in the hell it's in right now by overthrowing governments, by not letting them actually practice democracy in any way. It's just the democracy of, the dictatorship of, United Fruit Company. So that's just the reality you're dealing with there. I mean, so anyways, what do you want to say, Justin? I mean, want to get into
that was it. I just wanted to throw that out there about whenever you hear the narrative the right way, come here the right way.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, it's a disgusting.
They block all the right ways. So what are you supposed to do? Yeah,
absolutely, man. Absolutely. So real quick, I'm gonna just play the end of this here. This is Max Blumenthal's speech. I recorded this, and it's amazing. He's doing it. He kind of didn't want him to announce his baby, but he does. She's sleeping right through it, and that's just beautiful to see, man. I had a great time with playing with the baby, and it's a fun age, but. It's she's definitely getting exposed to some good influences here around the good folks we saw there on Saturday out there. In a mobilization for Palestine. And what I was saying about the ceasefire earlier was just that. Look, so often with these things with Palestine, as soon as there's some ceasefire agreement, people just act like everything's good. Like, no, the conditions haven't changed at all. Like, the reality is that's just like putting taking a time out to regroup and get some lower electrolytes flowing in your system and regroup, because this is not ending. It's not like the conditions of total blockade are in place and to the point where you can't even fish 3 kilometers, more than 3 kilometers off the shore. So it's just
you're penned in. You can't go anywhere. You can't leave.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
So anyway, no, you're right, man. And this is what Max kind of hits on here, but and bringing it up in the context of anti-Semitism and the way it's being exploited.
Yeah, don't want to start a social media pogrom.
Yeah, man.
That Judaism is Zionism. That's what they're saying. The Israel lobby is saying Judaism is Zionism. Who else says that? Who else uses Israel's crimes to implicate all Jews? Anti-Semites do that. Neo-Nazis do that. Fascists do that. So they are actually using an anti-Semitic logic to define us who oppose Zionism and apartheid as anti-Semites. And so we need to understand that Judaism, the prophetic voice of Judaism, is thousands of years older than Tel Aviv, a city that was built atop the Palestinian village of Manshia, that saw its entire population have their homes bulldozed, that saw the Palestinian population of Jaffa literally pushed into the sea under cannon fire, that saw them sent to the Gaza Strip, that saw the Gaza Strip be filled with 70% refugees. And what do we see in the Gaza Strip? We see prisoners and refugees resisting their imprisonment against their jailers. The people of the Gaza Strip have the right not just to survive, they have the right to resist, just as Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto did. And I'll leave you with that message today. Resist, 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 resist.
Yeah, so I think the key distinction Max is drawing there is the difference between supporting Palestine solely on human rights ground about Israeli war crimes and whatnot, which are all true, but the right of resistance, right, which is framed, of course, of nothing more than terrorism, right? The idea that let's not forget that the reason rockets started coming in to Israel in this sense was only because of what was going on in East Jerusalem. And the continued displacement of people that's still underway, right? The families are still fighting to get the Israeli authorities out of there, and that they're not going to stop. Israel can't. The racist logic of that country cannot, even when it's in its interest, stop that settler colonial ethos and the fundamental idea that a greater Israel, that this is our land, from being expressed in that kind of way, because you have to maintain political legitimacy domestically.
If you're a neutral party, okay, and you're witnessing from the outside America's longest actual war, which are the Indian Wars, with Afghanistan ending, like I said, I think I said this a couple of weeks ago, I hear that misused a lot. We're ending US's longest occupation and longest war. Indian War is actually a lot longer. But anyway, if you were just a neutral observer and you were saying that, would you be the person who goes, hey, whoa, America, take it easy. You're committing some human rights violations. Let's tone those down. Or would you say, no, these people have a right to fight you? Yeah. Because what you're doing is colonization. What you're doing is replacement. Yeah. It's replacement. So again, Max is absolutely spot on, because again, you can't, I'll never say no to the human rights people, because they are shining a light on it. Yeah. Sure.
No, awesome, but the problem is
to go further.
Yeah, the problem is if you then condemn the right to resist. I mean, let's not forget, people would call Iraqis terrorists simply for like defending their country from like a blatantly illegal invasion. I mean, what if like Iraqi forces were in the Gulf of Mexico, like invading Alabama? You think like those people wouldn't be like resisting with every ounce of fiber of their body? I mean, it's just like, it's not even a controversial. It's just like a fact of life. You like, invade a country illegally, like destroy it. And like, and you act like
if you invade a country legally, it doesn't matter. They're going to, like, the point is, you're going to fight for what you have. If you're just sitting here and somebody comes,
Well, you see me just like casually and like not even intentionally slipping into the whole like illegal war, as if like all you need to do is like legalize that war from like
and
a
then
few
it's
like
okay.
resolutions, and it's okay. Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm not a complete pacifist. I mean, I believe like that there has, but obviously it's like, there's a difference in defensive war, like literally defensive war, case I think World War II, right? And versus imperialist wars, and it just is, right? And it's a materialist like analysis and framework you can use to like determine which are which based on the reality of the conditions and what's happening. So but the big story was the big story over the last few days, at least on Twitter, was poor Eve Fartlow and her feelings. So I know, man. I don't even. But let's transition real quick here if we can. Naomi Osaka, issue of mental health. I think this is interesting in the sense of her withdrawing, and then like the idea that like there's an obligation to speak to the media. No, I mean I get. Here's the arguments. I mean the idea is that like look, in sport, like the reason like there's a market for it, the reason there's like money to be made and all that is like the fans, the consumer, like wanting the product, right? And like people, like you're actually, by not talking to the media ever, you're giving up that direct route, and it's like it's an obligation to like not to you and your fellow teammates, but also to the team you play for. It's all these like kind of like like old school like notions of like how things are supposed to be done, but what that, I mean, the whole thing obscures here is like that. First of all, the gatekeepers are just mad that like there are other avenues now for athletes to bypass them and actually control their own narratives and control their own their name, image, and likeness, right? Like how that's used and whatnot. So it's like the idea that like I don't know, that Naomi Osaka, that she had to like actually withdraw from the French Open, and I think it's actually powerful, man, because of what it shows is that like it and you hear the discourse changing. I mean, you even hear Stephen A. Smith in his answer, like to this question, like hedge, like his line is always, you have to talk to the media. It's like part of your obligation as an athlete. But with this, of course, when it's like mental health, he gets all personal, talking about his own like, his like having to see therapists the last 4 years to deal with the grief of his mother passing, and Molly Karam just like talking about the courage of him as a black man, opening up like that, and like look, in general, like it is. I commend that, but it's just the problem is that I feel like Stephen A. Smith is like kind of cynic. I mean, he might be genuine about that specific example, right?
Example, exactly.
Yeah, right. But so like now
he's like a sports Tom Hanks, though. Like he's gentrifying the landscape of the culture, because most of his takes steer you towards, a more center right ideology of like calling balls and strikes. Anyway, sorry, I just want to throw that.
I'm just going to read this Twitch NBC News piece. I think it gives some valuable context. So this is like tennis star Naomi Osaka's decision to push back, and she's also of a mixed. She's Japanese, half Japanese, half black. African American, that is. So she's from family. So that's her background, and she's been politically active and speaking out. Actually, I'm sorry, Japanese and Haitian heritage. I apologize. Moved to the U.S. at age of 3. All right, but anyways, she's been very outspoken in favor of like BLM and a lot of issues regarding race in America and racism and also gender issues too. So that's sort of the backdrop of that, and of course we know what comes with that: the shut up and dribble crowd. So anyways, Tennis star Naomi Osaka's decision to push back against the sports authorities and share her mental health struggles has drawn support from across the sports world and boosted hopes that greater attention will be given to the pressures faced by athletes, particularly women and players of color. Osaka withdrew from the French Open, which is part of the Grand Slam, Wimbledon, French Open, U.S. Open, Australian Open, the 4 biggest tennis tournaments in the world. Withdrew from the French Open on Monday after clashing with officials over her desire to skip media interviews to prioritize her mental health. The move has thrust her into the heart of an ongoing debate about what sports demand of athletes who compete at the highest levels, as well as the burden placed on minorities in traditionally white-dominated sports. Ranked number 2 in the world, Osaka moved to the U.S. at age 3 and has Japanese and Haitian heritage. She said this week that she has, quote, suffered long bouts of depression since being catapulted into the global spotlight after an unexpected victory over Serena Williams in the U.S. Open in 2018. Osaka said that she found some of the tournament rules for players outdated and thought it was better to exercise self-care and skip the press conferences. A number of black female tennis stars, players from the U.S. have expressed their support. On Tuesday, Coco Gauff said she admired Osaka's vulnerability, while Serena Williams said it was important to remember that everyone was different when it came to handling the spotlight. Sloane Stevens said that Osaka should be applauded, adding that she hoped her decision would lead to a more frank dialogue about the pressures many players face. Skip through, there's a lot of people play through being miserable and being upset. I think instead of basically traumatizing her and making fun of her situation, we should be more accepting, Stevens said in a news conference after her first round victory. So she goes on, as the piece goes on, they initially started by fining her, $15,000 daily for not participating. And then she did basically, Naomi didn't want to be a distraction and keep this whole thing going. So she basically says, actually, hold on, I'm apologies. Go ahead, Justin. I think you have something you want to say.
No. I'm just following along. Yeah.
All right. So anyways, I'll keep going then. However, on Tuesday, the 4 Grand Slam tournaments released the joint statement, right? So on behalf of the Grand Slams, we wish to offer Naomi Osaka our support and assistance in any way possible as she takes time away from the court. Mental health is a very challenging issue, which deserves our utmost attention. So, Justin, can you react to that, please? I think you might have.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's absolute horseshit. Again, like they don't want anything that calls attention away from the fact that this is a money-making endeavor. Like it, end of story. You know what I mean? Like, I know we hark on amateurism a lot because of how it's used, right? Like, amateurism and how it's used to hark on the players, college players, for wanting money, for wanting to be paid. Like, it's framed like that. But at the same time, it's like if you're this person, like if professional tennis goes away, it's not like you're not going to play tennis, right? And by making this a job in that regard, and the pressures it has, really does imply that well, if they didn't have this, they wouldn't have this. No, they'd still have tennis. You can't take tennis away. The pressures and what you feel as an athlete at that level to maintain that is because you're, again, there is a love of the game. There is an actual Bobby Jones love of the game, right? That exists in people. That's why you competed. That's why I competed. That stuff's real. But when it's just all dollar signs, I completely get where she's coming from. I think most athletes get where she's coming from. The pressure is, we don't care. We know that that's a thing, but don't you know this is part of that? This is part of that fat payday that comes from doing this thing.
Right.
Yeah, it is, for them to make a statement like that, it's, you know what, if this group, this league, this association wants to prove that they're committed to that, then cool. Tell her to take a year off of press conferences.
Yeah, literally. But no, but then you would have other issues. That's the problem. They would then have to actually, it would challenge the very validity, the purpose of the rule in the first place. And they don't want to do that. So
they're literally saying, hey, we support you and we will do whatever we can. Now get out there and talk to these people, or else we're going to keep finding you. Yeah. That's not, there's no solidarity. They have no solidarity with her.
Oh, of course not.
They are opposed to her.
That's why I think her dropping out of the tournament is powerful, because it shows, like, even though in the short term they're gonna just say like they're not gonna budge, it shows that like it makes people like realize like how serious she is about this, and how like it's not just about like specifically talking to the media now. It's about a larger question of like what you're obliged to do and what you're not. It's like a lot of people, I think, I don't have a problem talking to media, but they don't want to talk to media in the kind of contrived way that these press conferences are. And like someone like Marshawn Lynch, he got burned when he was in Buffalo by trusting a reporter who then ended up taking like his sort of kind of idiosyncratic charm and that people like really are attracted to, and basically making fun of it in the sense of like they making it out to be that he's like not that smart.
Yeah, and which is ridiculous. I mean, we've talked about this before. I have worked with Marshawn in a professional capacity multiple times, and like the notion of that is such bullshit. But again, it's the idea of like it's this all kind of goes back. I think the first time I remember this is, do you remember Rasheed Wallace in Portland?
Yeah.
Didn't talk to the media because he was about to set a record, but the record was one of those you don't want to set.
Oh, for technical fouls. Yeah.
And when he was so sick of talking about it, he skipped a press conference.
Yeah.
So he skipped it.
Justin, that's unforgivable.
He skipped it and they fined him. But do you remember what he did after that? So to avoid the fine, like this is literally like the first time I remember like a big primetime athlete like ever dealing with this shit. So he skips that one, gets fined. So he shows up for the next one. Every question they asked him, he answered one answer. Do you remember what that was?
Oh yeah. I mean, just like
it was a good game. Both teams played hard.
That's what
verbatim.
But my favorite line is, "I'm about that action, boss."
Yeah, exactly. But like my point is, Rasheed comes to you find him for not going. So he shows up and he answers every single question. And he answers it with an answer that's just
you don't want to hear.
It's just as generic as their questions. That's the point.
Yeah.
So he just says it was a good game. Both teams played hard, which isn't a legitimate answer. Like, I actually think that Rasheed put a lot of thought into like that answer.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And they fined him more money than when he didn't go at all. Yeah. And it's like at that point, it's all there. And this is like the first time like an athlete ever dealt with that. So again, with Marshawn, there's like a fly in here. Marshawn goes on to say, I'm just here so I don't get fined. I'm just here so I don't get fined.
Right.
Which is again a legitimate answer to their questions. Like it is, the pressure that's put on them. So yeah, for her to drop out, which just shows the power. We all know the power is with labor. You know what I mean? Like the real power is in taking that action and that step that says, all right, I'm not going to do this, because that's what they don't expect. Like their play is to make you do it. So you have to think of ways where we don't do it. The workers have so much more power than everybody. We always have, we always will. But wielding that in a way, being able to come together and organize, sure, it's difficult. But that's why I love it when an athlete, I love what she did, because she did what she could do with her power.
Yeah.
Just take it away.
Absolutely. Absolute facts. And I agree with all that. And I think that it's a powerful example of pushing back and also just inspiring other people to lose their fear. It's the fear of it takes a few people to bust through that and show that, you can resist. You can you might face pushback, but all the pushback you're going to get, you're also going to have that many people in your corner you didn't even know who were there maybe. And that's how solidarity is built. And it's the reason it's hard is because the working class is intentionally fragmented. I mean, it's that's by design. So the challenges are known, but they need to be continuously pointed out, but also not pointed out in a defeatist kind of sense, where it's easy to just think the forces are so overwhelming, just we got to give up. I guess we're just going to be in a permanent war state, and we're just going to continue just just financing everything through the main just violence. Like it's like you have an empire that's backed up by a garrison state that's completely and totally. And the irony is, it's like it's like a warrior class, whereas like the vast majority of people, aren't even touched by what we're doing, what we do over, in Afghanistan, which we're supposedly leaving in September, which we'll see how that goes. Not to mention all the CIA spooks that'll be saying around in Kabul and Kandahar and everywhere else. So that's
private military.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean,
we'll find a. Don't worry, we won't leave. We'll find a reason.
Well,
the whole deal is built in. It's like what's baked into the cake is all of these too hard demands that they'll never. If you're the Afghan people, you're not going to take that. Like literally, what's written in there are things they won't agree to, and that'll be. I'm just saying. I don't know if this is a prediction. I don't know if it's going to come true, but I feel pretty much like that'll come true. We'll find a way to be like that. They didn't live up to all the deal, so we're gonna have to stay.
Yeah. So let's see here. So Coach K, man. Coach K calls it quits, and I just want to get your take on the media reaction. I mean, I'm hearing stuff like the greatest, the greatest winner of all time, the absolute epitome of class. The esteemed professor of 41 years, someone who's just this is the guy who's a uniter, someone who's dedicated his life to inclusion and whatever by supporting the Republican Party, enthusiastically. I mean, it's anyways, I mean his USA basketball job, and you're coaching dream team players. I mean, it's not I mean, I think that's so overblown the way they act. He turned. The only reason USA basketball was so reached such lows was epic mismanagement, and just absurd level inability to actually court players and actually they didn't play because of a lack of confidence in it. And then for the Athens 2004 games. And then it was we're going to do this revamp. And it was Coach K gained so much more cachet from the idea that he's out there playing a central role. And LeBron and Melo and Kobe and those guys bringing home gold and dominating. It's kind of insane.
Yeah, but it's that's the shtick. They have their, it's like the opposite. I look at him as the opposite of Joe Paterno, and when I say that, I mean it's the media reaction to two very similar type people, right?
Right.
Joe's biggest crime wasn't what happened with Sandusky, because as we've talked about, I don't know what more a coach is supposed to do other than go to the real police and say, please stop this. I'm going to go back to coaching football. Anyway, which, by the way, they even omit from the HBO movie. I mean, it's really hard to get rid of a police record. But anyway, the point is, Joe had the audacity to say something along the lines of the Penn State way, which was just the right way, which is we'll kick people off the team for wrongdoing, all this stuff, right? We're going to do this. Yeah. We're not going to cheat. We're not going to fix grades. And it's when that happens, the media turns and goes, we will find the weak spot in this armor if it kills us. And Coach K is the exact opposite. He's the guy who's never said that. He never had the audacity to say, look, college basketball is broken and I'm going to be different. So they did it for him. You know what I mean? Because he never called that shot, he never took that mantle, he never asked for it. He's been given it. And with all college athletics, the recruiting issues, the shoe deal, it's all there because it's all there across the board. You know what I mean? And that's what happens because money drives college sports, not Coach K's integrity. And also, I will just throw out there, it's not how your last name's pronounced. Stop lying.
No, Mike Krzyzewski, and look, I mean, I'm Mike Krzyzewski. I look like a rat, but
Coach Krasinski over here is.
No, sorry. Anyways, I talk like this in a very kind of monotone academic kind of like voice, because I realized that it makes me sound more intellectual, and like that I'm like very cerebral in my approach to basketball and the way we recruit young men and help them develop. Now, when I get into the actual game, I start just dog cussing people like crazy. I mean, I verbally abuse people constantly. I harass the referees every game in a way, as a way to intimidate them and make them fear the kind of influence and retribution I could bring back on them in the form of my using and exerting my influence over very powerful people in the Atlantic Coast Conference to make sure that you never referee a game again in basketball. But let's don't talk about that now. Let's talk about the development of strong young men that are going to be like positive influences on their community in the business world, and like really and learn those life lessons of integrity and honor and duty on our country that I learned as a West Point cadet playing for Bobby Knight, of course, because we all know Bob Knight really embodies everything about like what sports should be about, and really a real humanist, a guy who bends over backwards to like help people and lift people up. It has nothing to do with the ego and yourself and self-exaltation and all this sort of other bizarre repressed issues or repressed issues I have. It has nothing to do with that. I mean, it kind of does actually, but we can't talk about that. Anyways, I mean, I don't know. I don't know my impression, but the reality is, let's just hear from Coach K real quick, because I want to hear Justin's like response to hearing his voice, because like it really drives me kind of crazy the way
his voice is.
It's like his voice is part of the persona of like him is like this very like cerebral, insightful, like paragon of virtue in terms of like he represents like the greatness of like America, and for a lot of like sports fans that are like kind of right wing and come from a certain like ideological mold. It's like he embodies like American exceptionalism. They're like that you evolve, you learn, you grow. We're kind of reasoned and smart people, but it's like it's so fake, and it's such a front, and you can just see that in the contradiction of how he treats people who he can run roughshod over. So anyways,
when I was in high school at Weber, she said Michael, whenever she had something important, it was Michael, always be with good people. And I followed her advice my whole life.
All right, who are good people?
So when I was at West Point.
So let's talk about who good people doesn't include, like the Black Panther Party, like all kinds of like revolutionary folks of all kinds of oppressed nationalities, workers movements. Those are troublemakers. And he does look like a Nixon administration official. Like facts. I mean, it's just like, that's the cloth he's cut from. I mean, so anyways.
How lucky can you get? I'm at the greatest leadership school in the world.
There you go. The leadership discourse. Look at that facial expression there, by the way. I mean, like, he actually is a rat. I mean, like, look like, and I don't know what else to say. It's like he always leadership school. He's going to release a book within a year of like the principles.
Oh, absolutely.
It'll be like trying to, because like John Wooden had like all the maxims, that like he went by about like, and he's nowhere close. By the way, he's not on John Wooden's level. By the way, I can't even believe people are talking about that. I mean, Wooden like was like an academic who like actually taught school like before he got into coaching, and he had like double the national titles Coach K had anyways, if you want to look at it sport wise. So I think I already want to shut that talk down like right now, because that's been when I saw that he was retiring after this next season, it was in a headline that was already like in defense, and it was like, and it literally was like Coach K retiring after the 21-22 season, but for family, not because the game has changed. Yeah, it's like they thought about that. Roy Williams got all that pushback for saying the game has changed, right? But this is it. Yeah, it's interesting because when you think of
they're
them now,
apologizing. Like, yeah, they're
Right.
like doing the
they're
excuse.
anticipating criticism, but they're also, I think what's interesting is like coaches who really aren't about like the ego and aren't about it all being about themselves. They just like bow out because they actually don't want all this. It's clear he wants so badly this like final swan
He wants
song,
all of it.
a year of adoration. Not to mention, it's like it puts the program in an awkward spot. Like he's either gonna what are you gonna do? Like hire tell the UCF players that Johnny Dawkins is gonna be the next head coach and tell them like, hey, I'm just gonna be your coach this year and like screw up your whole recruiting cycle because I'm gonna no, you can't do that. So I don't know what they're going to do actually with that yet because I don't know if it's going to be Johnny Dawkins. But
he's going to have a Derek Jeter like farewell tour. Like all the fans at like all these schools that hate Duke are going to like give him like his little like clap.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Man, I wish Maryland was still in the ACC just this next year, man. That would be epic. Like, but going into College Park, but also like we'll see in Chapel Hill what happens. I hope they don't.
Yeah, I hope he gets hit with popcorn. Notice how I said something like really soft.
There you go.
Not going to hurt him.
I want to make Justin listen to Coach K for a couple more minutes.
One of the greatest coaches of all time, and Bob Knight. Boom, boom, boom.
Oh wait, I got the volume. Boom, boom, boom. You hear that? Right. Boom, boom, boom. I just hit you in the face.
Yeah, like I just choked a player.
And Bob Knight. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, boom, boom, boom. You want to hear that again? Boom, boom, boom.
Named for one of the greatest coaches of all time, and Bob Knight. Boom, boom, boom. Those aren't punches that.
Boom, boom, boom. Those aren't punches. Oh, they are punches. Wait, never mind. I'm gripping your throat. There's strangulation. My bad.
You out. Those are punches that give you that leadership character.
Boom. He's like leadership character. Boom. I'm literally punching down.
Wait a minute. So you're telling me the player that got fired for physically assaulting, you're literally using a punching reference?
How lucky can you get?
How lucky can you get, Justin?
I can get a lot more lucky.
Justin, it's the American dream. Got to serve in the Army.
After I do my service and
my service.
Gives me an
it's like a service project, you know?
And go to graduate school.
Just like being an Eagle Scout.
I'm there for 1 year.
Bob Knight,
they
Indiana.
One of the greatest teams of all time. I learned there.
I learned there.
28.
I learned.
I think Shire's young. He's 33. I was 28. Although
Shire.
Yeah, more handsome. Yeah, at that time in my life.
In my opinion. Marcel, in my opinion. I always see since Coach K, of course, his opinion is like I'm the best. I look the best. I am the best, right? But I'm so humble, and it's just about leadership, and it's all about the kids. It's all about my guys and helping them. Even though I'm gonna like endlessly make all these like references to my own like credentials and like my own kind of like use of like big words, like leadership academies, and all this BS. And it's a little punching metaphor there for Bob Bob Knight. And success and talking about being a West Point guy, it's like being in the Army and Bob Knight. I mean, it's just it just fits within such a neat ideological little box. Justin, you hear me? You cut out?
Yeah.
It fits neatly within like a very easily defined ideological box. It's like a class of people that are like the lawyers, in cities that are coach their kids' basketball team, but they're liberals. Maybe they have they coach some black kids, because like their kids' basketball team, their son, and they're open to like some reforms here and there. But of course, like they question anything systemically about the whether capitalism is like an exploitative system, right? That's pushing it too far. I'll put one of those signs in my yard, like "Hate has no home here," right? Like Black Lives, all this, the Black Lives Matter. It's funny because like one thing we talked about Max earlier, he was saying that like the only people that have those signs out are not, first of all, not black people generally. I've hardly ever, in DC at least, they're like virtue signaling liberals, and some of them are actually like putting it up because they think it's like maybe will like reduce the chance that their house gets broken into. like that's actually been something that gets articulated. That the level of like liberal virtue signaling around just like kind of like superficial displays of solidarity against racism, which is like good. It's good people are anti-racist. I hope they are, but they're not actually supporting the kind of policies that need to be supported in order to redress those things, in order to like actually make systemic change, in order to like empower people. But the problem is that in empowering people that are exploited and are oppressed, that takes away the easily exploitable labor that the capitalists who run the society want. They want a reserve army of labor where there's not, they can always pull somebody else, someone's replaceable, right? And the system of like scarcity that is so central to the system staying in place and maintaining its validity in a high enough percentage of the population in order for it to sustain itself, is predicated on these things being the case. So yeah, Justin, do you want to hop in?
I know they're good people. Coach K is good people, and I know those same people you're talking about are good people. But you know why? Because they posted a black photo, just a full black photo on Instagram on one day out of the year, and then that's how I know that they're doing something.
Yeah. I mean, it's the fake like virtue signaling type stuff. Look. I mean, there's nothing. I mean, I'm not gonna say like anybody that wants to like realize try to struggle against racism, good. But like the problem is there is a dynamic of that's just like not doing anything. It's like defining doing something by just like these. You don't, because like part of that class, the liberal kind of class that favors like different cultural reforms and whatnot, but they're not like actually standing in solidarity on class lines. Never do you see on those signs anything to do with like workers' rights matter, the worker power, God forbid that. Actual empowerment. Yep. These kind of people are like, they can be anti-racist, but they're like supporting a specific type of like black exceptionalism and hopefully like, white savior complex type things. They can feel really good and gratified by donating to like an inner city outreach program, after school program, which is good. Do that. Like this stuff like matters and it helps and it provides, like my experience, at the sanctuary on 8th Street in Jacksonville is full of testament to that. Yeah. If it's not followed by any kind of politics, it's actually like, it's pointing out the inherently antagonistic nature of like the people who profit off the society. The reality that the reason they're so afraid of worker empowerment is the very reason that like they need to keep a class of people exploited, divided, powerless, or seemingly feeling like they're powerless, in order to maintain the exploitative schemes. I mean, just listen to all these business owners bemoaning the fact they can't find labor. Well, like they're realizing like, instead of being mad about like unemployment benefits, giving people a modicum of security, all right, why not question the whole nature of like the question is, it's not that people don't want to work. They're not going to go back and work for things that like are sacrificing their body, doing like demeaning type work a lot of times.
No health care, minimum wage.
And then like acting as if they're like bootstrapping it, and it's some sort of moral like decision. It's like the idea that like you're becoming, America's becoming lazier. What's happened? You hear this stuff all the time, like the wussification of like America. Yeah. Like people are just soft now, right? A lot of that what that entails is like them being just like frustrated over like certain things changing that like where they gave them at least perceived benefits over others. They're, if not real, and in some cases they are real material benefits because of stuff like racism, but having those things basically challenged, right? It's an affront to the privilege they feel they're entitled to, essentially.
Yep. I mean, and it is like, here's the deal. Like, so much comes down to healthcare, right? If the job's not offering healthcare, here's the deal. If you're on unemployment, I've been on unemployment. I know lots of people who've been on unemployment at times in their lives. Like, if you're on unemployment, that pretty much is the fastest way to get through to Medicare. And then now your healthcare is covered and all these jobs are sitting here going, I wonder why no one wants to work for us. You're never going to give anything. You know what I mean? Like you're never going to reach that level, because that's the thing with Medicare. It's going to go away once you start working, because they're going to be like, oh, you make enough for private insurance. And like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
No, you don't. But the fact that you're employed versus the fact that you're on unemployment, it's ridiculous. And as far as the virtue signaling shit, it drives me crazy. The last project that I worked on right before I left Amazon was one on diversity and inclusion. I was tasked to make an entire video for the company to look good on diversity and inclusion. It was the biggest bunch of bullshit from the top down, as far as like when I would meet with senior leaders and they'd say what they really wanted to accomplish. Weird how that's not actually in line with diversity or inclusion.
Right.
You want the image, and they're so open about that because they're looking at me going, well, you get it, right? Like you get it. Right. And you're like, no, this is fucking gross. But anyway, I think I told you this in a private conversation once, that there was a developer that worked for Amazon from Colombia, and she was we did like 30 interviews with people from handpicked around the company, handpicked by HR for the diversity and inclusion. So you just go ahead and close your eyes and picture what they went out and like pre-selected, right? So let's be honest, they picked her because she was from Colombia, but in that interview that I did with her, and then we filmed it, it was so powerful, talking about what's happened with Colombia, talking about actual like material things and causes. And it was the only one that could have been impactful. It was emotional. It actually could have done something. And they literally, when we cut that interview, we showed it to them, they were like, it gets too political. Axe it.
Yeah. I mean,
this girl's time wasted. This, you know what I mean? Like what actually could have been helpful, fucking get rid of it. This is not what we want. This is too political.
I mean, Justin, you obviously aren't surprised. I mean, like, it's like,
no, not at all.
I mean, like,
I just want people to know that when they see those, there's another side to this. Yeah. That other side to these videos you watch are like me sitting here going, yeah, so this all sucks. These are the worst. Like, just we're ticking boxes. That's all we're doing. We're just checking boxes and we're just putting this message out. But whatever was actually captured that was good, cut. Absolutely cut.
Oh, yeah. We just got to say, like, we love everyone, like freedom, like rights, equal rights. Yeah, yay, boo, or whatever. And just like, it's meaningless, it's vacuous. That's the point, right? Anyways, let's wrap up on this. Alex Rubinstein, subscribe to his Substack if you get a chance. Great reporter, he lives in Mexico City now. His brother Ben Rubinstein's like, up and coming. They got his own, doing some stuff on YouTube now. Friend of mine too, friend of the show. But Alex wrote this piece called "Coalition Pushing Beijing Olympics Boycott," comprised of U.S.-funded destabilization NGOs, and it says a syndicate of interconnected NGOs funded by the U.S. government and hell-bent on balkanizing China is behind the hashtag boycott Beijing 2022 campaign. So I want to get your reaction to that, Justin.
Yeah, it is, and I am of the ilk that is anti-Olympics, but I'm only anti-Olympics. I mean, this has nothing to do with this. I'll get into that. But I'm anti-Olympics moving. I feel that international competition's fine. I do think there's a little bit of a weird like nationalistic thing, by throwing your country on your chest and like competing, as where like I think, again though, like competition's great and like measuring yourself against the best of the best, that's all awesome. Yeah,
but it also gives like oppressed nations the chance to like, show themselves in a different light. That's not like just the way the U.S. like portrays
exactly.
Right?
So there are pros and cons. My biggest thing with the Olympics is I do feel that they should be in one site every year because too many cities waste money. Like it's a grift. It's such an absolute grift. It destroys mostly neighborhoods of color in every city it goes to. You know what I mean? Like it destroys poor neighborhoods. It's a reason for real estate to literally get everyone on board, take over an area and gentrify it, but at a much faster, much higher rate. So anyway, I'm all about international competition. Like you said, I do like that it allows nations that have a certain image to represent what they truly are instead of what we say they are. I do think it should have a universal, or a singular location.
Yeah, probably Athens, each place, because that's like the birthplace.
Sure. Yeah. You know what I mean? And same with the Winter Olympics. But what's happening here isn't for any of those positive reasons. This is for our, Adrian Zentz creative reasons.
Well, let me read the beginning at least of this. The United States Regime Change Arm, the National Endowment for Democracy, aka the CIA, has funded at least half of the groups involved in the media offensive. Other groups are involved or otherwise tied to the national security state. On Monday, the AP ran a story about the campaign with the sole exclusive source coming from an organization that got 272,000 plus from the NED for the years 2016 through 19. The AP story claimed the charge was being led by a, quote, coalition representing, emphasis mine, Alex wrote, Uyghurs, Tibetans, residents of Hong Kong, and, quote, and others, end quote, pushing for a full-scale boycott of the Beijing Winter Olympics scheduled for 2022. The AP story on this campaign featured nearly 200 directly quoted words from Leiden I don't want to mispronounce it. Of the Tibet Action Institute. Yet it failed to mention that the Tibet Action Institute has received the amount over 272 grand from the National Endowment for Democracy since 2016. I mean, the level of just interference and just insanity with this, like the way that these are like astroturf like political movements that are meant to like seem grassroots now in the interest of like doing the bidding of the U.S. national security state. Unbelievable. I mean,
it is, it's been eye-opening for me. I don't know, the age of everybody that's on right now, but for me, that age was probably like 13, like 12, 13, and free Tibet was a big thing. And I remember getting on board for all the reasons, like the framework, right? Like you have this massive, country with its military, and then you have, what you envision of Tibet, which is just monks and stuff, and I remember just kind of like easily buying into that. And I think that all the bullshit with the Uyghur genocide, I love that.
Justin, don't forget about the guy in DC, like out there flicking off the anti-Asian racism practices, right? Going by, I'm in East Turkestan, like where all the separatist stuff. They want to create a Salafi, Salafist like type, cut off, breakaway nation state. It just so happens to be one of the only regions of China where you have a lot of, guess what? Oil reserves. I don't even know if it's a lot, but there are.
Yeah, it is. It's one of those things that, Neil, great point in the comments. Like, you just think it's like an issue that people care about, right? You don't think about it in terms of like, it's at your church. If it's at your church, like, why is it at your church? Like,
that's true. A lot of like liberal type churches too, like the do-gooders, like like Presbyterian Church USA that says that has good lines on Palestine. Has supported like different the BDS of the settlements and stuff, but not when it comes to China. The left, the old school left, the boomer generation, man. It all comes back to the boomers again.
This idea, right? Like, well, they're putting the Uyghurs in concentration camps. Well, those are jails, and we have those too. Oh, they're doing re-education camps. That's called job training. Turns out China has really good job training.
We have a lot more people in prison than they do in China, actually.
They're doing we got to go further. So, they're actually ethnically cleansing them. Cool. Their population's risen every year. I don't even know how. What group gets ethnically cleansed the same time that it's provable that year after year they have more.
Justin, but can you trust anything out of China? And I mean anything, unless it's Adrian Zenz. All right.
Yeah.
But like anything else? Like, can we really verify the data? I mean, like, dude, I mean, how do we know that
yes, we can.
No. How do we know they didn't have 10 million Chinese Uyghurs die intentionally because of coronavirus? You know, I mean, I heard somewhere, you know, I heard on the radio. It's like, you know, like some uncle I have, like, but listen, that yeah, you know, what was it like the whole thing? Like, you know, oh yeah. I heard that they're the China's you know that the whole Daniel, I actually kind of just forgot the last name. Go ahead.
It's all good. Just, I mean, it is the timing of this, the timing of all of this. You know, it wasn't until you know, to go back to to listening to Michael Hudson, it wasn't that and China's really open about this. China has a plan. China has a 5-year plan. China has a 10-year plan. China has a 15-year plan. You know, and one of their things is to break.
Yeah, but wait, Justin. But can you trust any of that? I mean, how do we really know? I mean, that's what I was actually going to say real quick. All right, I got to finish this because how do we really know they have a plan? How do we know that, like, instead of actually defeating the coronavirus, they didn't just intentionally deploy it as a biological weapon to kill the Uyghurs? How do we know? How do we know that isn't true?
Here's how we know. Because their 5-year plan, as you very well know, is to show the world that you don't need us. And they're really close to achieving it, considering that what they're pulling off now is exactly what we did during the Industrial Revolution. And they're doing it better. They're doing it for the benefit of their people. Yeah, there's a little, like, I will never, ever, ever say that what China has is entirely communist 100% of the way. No, they've let some capitalism in. They've let a certain type of capitalism in.
But first of all, communism is not something that's even like they would even claim to have, like, because that's like you look at it, like, you want to get in like theory. I mean, that's like a stage where it's like you've actually gone through the process of like building socialism, and like there's like such material abundance. It's like an abstraction at this point.
Yeah.
They've had market reforms to, like, for sure.
Exactly. They are to a spot where, just like we did during our Industrial Revolution and our boom, and you have two ways, right? You could say, okay, I'm going to become the dominant empire, which is what we did. Or you can say, you know what? I had to play your little game, previous dominant empire, but now I don't have to. And we're working towards a way where we don't have to. And that's their plan. And that is exactly why, well, all this is happening. Because when that happens, and I actually feel that when they get to a certain point, there's a lot of things where it's like, well, what about this tie about like their manufacturing? They're manufacturing our consumers. They're manufacturing our consumers. They're playing a game to where we don't exist to a certain point, and we're not necessary to a certain point. And when that happens, it's such an end game, but it's not an end game for the world. It's not an end game for, how many countries are there? 219. Like, it's not an end game for 217 of them. It's an end game for us, which is why this shit's so pushed so hard. They have to be like who we take on. They have to be, because this place, what would we do? What would we do? I mean, hopefully we can have a workers' revolt here and move back towards doing the same thing, instead of this time repeat the Industrial Revolution, but without going, and then let's make everyone play this game.
Yeah, well,
and force them to bend to our knee.
But think about it. I mean, like, like things like even like robots and like all the kind of technologies like that could under socialist economy, where it's like actually doesn't just exist for the purpose of like extracting profit for like an ownership class. Like, but if you, I mean, you could have I could see a lot of benefits to things. The things that could liberate us from the material restraints, like things that have that's the thing of technology. When you think definition wise, it's like things that help that that can help liberate us to what degree depends on what it is, from certain biological restraints, like on what we're able to do, and things that like, so if we're able to like make advancements that allow people to then focus on things that are like more that matter more to them, they're less like just, how do we just survive? I mean, let's not forget, like, we were hunter gatherers at one point, right?
Yeah.
And like we've had development to the point where like, you only have art, you only have culture when there's like enough abundance, right, of things and enough like, resources to enable that. And then the class consciousness, the different, like, if it's a class stratified society, like, ours is, like, do you have the different class consciousness that develop amongst people that are of that strata, right? And so if you don't have, so if that technology wasn't just being used as a way to replace, like, if there wasn't the desperation, like to like have to work, a job, like just to like literally survive and subsist, like imagine the kind of creativity that could be unleashed, the kind of like, and the incentives would just change. It's like these like, right wingers always love to say like, oh, no one will have any motivation. There's all kinds of motivation, like, and incentives. It's just not based on just total extraction of like, everything in private gain. In looking at exploitation is like something that's just what anybody would do if they were in that situation. Just for some winners, some losers, some guys, we got to have ditch diggers. Like it's like kind of like just BS. Like logic really gives you it captures the essence of like sort of petty bourgeois ideology.
It's astounding that we spend all this time and effort. Like you look at how far away, and the different countries that are at different phases. Really, you got to hand it to China for playing us at our own game in a way, right? And using our capital to build their, what they have going, like using the US's money to get where they're going, which is the exact thing, right, that the US has tried to prevent. Like that's why we keep most countries poor. But it's like, I think they really thought, I think that US mentality, especially our elite class, our ownership class, really thought, man, we are exploiting these people. We'll move all our manufacturing, we'll move when really you're just digging them out of a poverty and slowly moving that up.
Yeah, I mean, China just saw that as a stage of development, and like now, and now they're able to like start pushing. And that's why the Americans, like the capitalists, are freaking out, because now they have enough power and development to where they, they can just say F you now, and a lot of, and that's
they built more highway last year than we have in 100. Like it is astounding. And again, they're doing this, and I think that like, that was like, it's funny to me, because again, we play such, 3, 4, 5-dimensional chess, right? Like our leaders are always playing these advanced, complicated.
They're so smart. Joe Biden, especially.
They didn't see this coming. And now you got a 5-year plan in China to get off the dollar, to get off that banking system, to get off of, and to get out from underneath any kind of sanctions, and to make it to where we can't just steal their money. We can't just take things because they're off that system. And when that happens, I mean, where do we go? You know what I mean? Like, where do we go? It is, and the fact that people just regurgitate like the evil, the China's evil, or like you were joking earlier, right? How can we trust them? How can we trust anything they say, right? Like whatever we got to do to just push this narrative, because it's, you got to topple it, or else what? What does that mean for the US? And that's, I mean, it's bittersweet, because I mean, I absolutely, like, I will definitely, I'm sorry, like I'll say it here. I'll say it live on air. If it comes to a ground war, I mean, how do I sign up for the Chinese army? I don't want to.
Oh no.
Out of the two.
Oh yeah,
If we
yeah.
lose, if something genuine can come out of this, you know what I mean? Like if we can wise up and create something out of what comes from that.
Yeah, but there would never be any kind of military engagement on this continent, though. It would be the U.S. invading there. You know what I mean? So that's why, like, it's like, you know, it's just sort of like an abstract notion. But I hear what you're saying. I mean, it's like obviously,
it's just
like if something was so brazen like that, you know, I would want no part, and like I would want to do, you know, we'd have to stand with, like, you know, the side that's the right side, and like, you know, honestly, U.S. imperialism just ain't it, and like, you know, we got to get people in this country, because there's a lot of good people in this country, man. Despite
absolutely,
like,
100%.
Gotta organize people, gotta reach people, and you know, so that, you know, because it can't just be about tearing something down. It's got to be like about constructively building something that's better, that's different, that's better, and allows us to reach, like, you know, our full human potential. And it's about like actually trying to enable people to like reach their full human potential, right? And anyways, I want to read something from real quick before we wrap here. This is from Alex Rubinstein, Campaign for Uyghurs founder. This is continued from his piece here. And executive director Rushan Abbas previously worked for Radio Free Asia, U.S. propaganda outlet. We all know that. But he goes, Mr. Abbas, he's been doing this for years, essentially. The website goes on to note that Abbas worked closely with the U.S. State Department, Department of Justice, State and Department of Defense, and certain U.S. administration, and highlights 11-year stint working as a translator at Guantanamo Bay. We, the Hong Kongers, is ironically, it's also based in the U.S. The Southern Mongolia Human Rights Information Center. What about China against the death penalty? Keep Taiwan free.
Formosa.
Yeah. So rather than being an organic movement to fight repression by the Chinese government, the Boycott Beijing 2022 coalition appears to be yet another AstroTurf movement orchestrated by U.S. government lackeys to chip away at China's transcending presence on the world stage. So that's Alex Rubinstein's article. I didn't read the whole thing, but check it out on it's realalexruby.substack.com. All right. And I'll put the link to this piece in the comments. Just let's go ahead and wrap. So anything you want to finish the show on, man, go for it.
I just have one thing to say, and that is that whenever somebody says Taiwan, just shout back the word Formosa, because that's what it's called.
Yeah, they ethnically cleanse like indigenous people from there. It's not talked about, right? Shanghai Shek, you know, it's like, you know, I remember like American classes kind of taught us like this. He was the good guy, and unfortunately, he lost out. You know, and they had to go flee to Taiwan to escape the diabolical, you know, Mao Zedong. And so, it's crazy, man. And like, you know, just I want to alert people real quick. There's an insane podcast on like Spotify now, and it's called like. Let me give you the name of this so alert people to this. And like, it's like the absolute most cartoonish thing I've ever seen. I was like actually texting with Wyatt Reed about this the other night. It's called Real Dictators. So like, and it's like they literally allege that like it's just like, let's see here. It's legit the worst podcast ever. I mean, like ever. Like I've never seen anything so cartoonishly absurd in my life.
Worse than Behind the Bastards.
Yeah.
Which, by the way,
look, you got like Stalin up there in the front. You know, Kim Jong Un and Hitler, and it's like, you know, putting up like the most insane arguments I've ever seen. It's just like all the every stereotypical absurdity you could ever hear about. Like
I love that Stalin's up front with Hitler
in the background. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So we'll just leave it on that. Noiser. So if you want to go troll somebody, go find this like jackass. I heard that Wyatt messaged me back saying that this is what he found. As far as I can tell, this is what Wyatt Reed said. Dude, you should check out his work, by the way. He's been to Bolivia, Colombia a lot, written for the Gray Zone. It's producer for By Any Means Necessary. But he goes, says, as far as I can tell, This man's main historical qualifications are pretending to be a rapist British soldier who famously pretended to be an officer. Oh, Jesus, he's on Dr. Yeah. So it's like this guy, the narrator of these things, is putting this podcast together. It's getting pumped out by Noiser and it's all over Spotify and shit. It's like a straight up like fascist, man. Like an absolute psycho.
Did you see Jack Prosobic's like history of Antifa video?
I did not. No, I did not.
Oh my God. I'll text you that. We can talk about that next week.
All right. I'll have to get on that, man.
It is insane. He just jumps around. Like he basically is like, Antifa was started by German, anti-fascist action, but really created Hitler. No, they literally are like, and it created Hitler. And then he just instantly goes from like flash forward, Mao.
Right.
And
Mao.
you're like, what? Yeah. You skipped a bunch.
Yeah, Hitler, Mao. Hitler, Stalin, Hitler, Mao.
It's amazing. But anyway, I mean,
by the way, the Denver Nuggets eliminated the Portland Trailblazers. Not a comment. Damian Lillard's like, free Palestine, Damian said. So
yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. And he just balled like I've never, like, it was just like unbelievable. Like,
it was like Allen Iverson with the 76ers again. You know what I mean? It's like watching one person like pull a team through. It's not to discount what the other guys can do, but I'm just saying watching one person's efforts, like just do everything they can to like lift a team. Yeah, it was impressive.
It's a testament to how much support he doesn't have right now from his teammates.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Robert coming in missing that dunk. I mean, it's just like no one stepped up to help him out. But anyways, we'll go ahead and wrap there. I appreciate all y'all. Check out By Any Means Necessary tomorrow for the Redspin report. And also Justin will be dropping the episode with Andrew Marinus, the New York Times bestselling author, guy who wrote.
Yeah, it was a great interview. It was awesome.
With about Glenn Burke, the first openly gay MLB player for the Los Angeles Dodgers, who grew up in the Bay Area, in the East Bay. So, look out for that. Also, you got a piece you said coming out here soon too, or?
Yeah, I've been working on tracing back all of the instances where ESPN's ever covered a owner-player labor dispute. And so far, like I said a couple weeks ago, I'm into the early 90s now and still have not found a single time where they've been on the side of the player.
Oh man, so, can't wait for that.
Again,
awesome deep dive. Yeah, we're gonna do more historical type episodes. I want to talk. Justin and I need to get together and plan something. But I got what a few people have told me before is a lot of useless knowledge in your mind, about facts and dates and movements and whatnot, and also
none of it's useless. None of it's useless
in sport, but also in sports history. So it'd be interesting to kind of like instead of like all the documentary type podcasts that are going historicizing stuff, to go through and do some of that with sport and like point out like. Maybe have poke some holes in some mainstream narratives. All right. So other than that, look, appreciate y'all hanging out. Like, please like, share, subscribe. I always forget to say that, man. So I feel kind of like a grifter just constantly saying it, but you kind of got to do it. But anyways, man, we appreciate it. We're going to keep going with this stuff and looking forward to what Justin's got coming out. Y'all be well. Peace.
Bye, everybody.